Chapter 425. At the top of the pyramid, Xianhao stood calmly. His long black and white hair fluttered in the wind, and his hands were behind his back. His eyes were deep and his face was calm. From the beginning, Xianhao had already reached the platform at the top. He looked down at the many geniuses fighting below. It was not until Yi Guchen appeared that Xianhao's face changed. However, he did not besiege Yi Guchen like the other geniuses, because Xianhao disdained to do so. In the Void Sword realm, he encountered an unprecedented setback when facing Yi Guchen. All his opportunities were taken away by Yi Guchen. In the end, he was embarrassed by the destructive thunder tide. It could be said that Xianhao's cultivation had been smooth since then. Whether it was comprehending sword essence or leaving his name on the sword-seeking steel, it meant that Xianhao had extraordinary talent. He had always been the top genius of the limitless sword sect. Even geniuses like Xianfeng and Xiandai, who were a threat to him, could not shake his position. Xianhao's only defeat so far came from Yi Guchen. Therefore, although he was relieved of Yi Guchen's death, he was also a little unwilling. He wanted to defeat Yi Guchen with his own hands. Now the opportunity had come. Yi Guchen raised his head slightly and looked at the figure standing proudly at the top of the pyramid. Before Yi Guchen became famous, Xianhao was already a famous genius in the Saint Origin dynasty, and now he was still a genius. Even so, there was no trace of fear in Yi Guchen's eyes. As a swordsman, he had to have the determination to challenge the strongest. Feeling the dignified atmosphere, the tens of thousands of onlookers in the arena all held their breath. Yi Guchen, Xianhao. Among these two, one was the top genius of the limitless sword sect. He was famous and had a peerless sword essence. He dominated the younger generation of the dynasty and had almost never been defeated. One of them was a top genius who had just risen up. The name of the sword master resounded throughout the entire dynasty. In the sword realm of the void, he had killed 100 people with a single sword strike. In the end, he had even killed hundreds of elite geniuses with a strange thunder. It could be said that these two people were outstanding existences in the younger generation of the dynasty, and today they would collide. Yi Guchen, your arrogance should come to an end. Xiantai stared coldly at Yi Guchen. Xiantai was not the only one who thought so. Granny Shichuan, Hun Tianhou, and the others also thought the same. Yi Guchen could be said to be a dark horse that had appeared out of nowhere in this exchange, causing these factions to lose face. Ta Lin and the others from the sword sect were also a little nervous at this moment. Although they had confidence in Yi Guchen, Xianhao was definitely not an ordinary top genius. His strength was unfathomable. Even in the Void Sword realm, Xianhao had never used his full strength. Feeling the attention of the crowd, both Yi Guchen and Xianhao focused on nothing else. Yi Guchen, you have far exceeded my expectations. Not only did you not die, but you have also recovered your genuine qi and your strength has greatly improved. Xianhao stood at the top of the pyramid and said calmly, "Are you disappointed?" Yi Guchen dragged the Xianming heavy sword and walked step by step from the bottom of the pyramid to the top of the pyramid. Step by step, step by step. Disappointed? Heh, if it was before I might have. But now, I'm not disappointed. Not only am I not disappointed, but I'm also very happy. Do you know why? The corners of Xianhao's mouth revealed a faint smile. Because I can defeat you with my own hands. That's good. Otherwise, this exchange would be really boring. In the face of Xianhao's provocation, Yi Guchen remained indifferent. His temperament was deeper than Xianhao's. Ha! Yi Guchen, you are as arrogant as ever. However, you should know that today, not only will I not let you go, but the people from the other factions will also not let you go. Therefore you only have one path, and that is a dead end. As soon as Xianhao finished speaking, the peerless void sword essence was released, causing the space to tremble. Waves of sharp sword qi seemed to shuttle through the void. The aura of the 9 changes of the divine soul realm, and the aura of the void sword essence erupted at the same time, causing Xianhao's long hair to flutter. Feeling Xianhao's aura, everyone in the fighting arena was shocked. The top genius of the limitless sword sect lived up to his reputation. Seeing this, the corners of Xiantai's mouth curled into a smile as he nodded in satisfaction. He believed that Xianhao would not disappoint him. Yi Guqian walked step by step up the pyramid, facing Xianhao's oppressive aura. He dragged the heavy sword on the ground and smiled. A dead end? For me, Yi Guqian, as long as I have a sword in my hand, there is no such thing as a dead end. I want to draw my sword and soar into the sky. I want to be free and unfettered. As soon as Yi Guqian finished speaking, he stomped on the ground and rushed up with the help of the rebound force. The Xianming heavy sword in his hand swept across the void, as if it was going to cut through the 9 heavens. Past. Now. Future. No one could threaten Yi Guqian with a sword in his hand, because when he had a sword in his hand, no one could stop the tip of the sword. Boom. His move was like gunpowder, instantly igniting the atmosphere in the fighting arena. The inner yard disciples of the Sword Sect's Tower Forest were even more excited and roared. The Sword Sect is invincible. Bang. Xianhao's cold eyes flashed and he also drew his sword. Today he was going to crush Yi Guqian's pride. Yi Guqian's sword vibrated and the void shook violently. Ripples spread in all directions, and the entire fighting arena rumbled. Void sword technique, void 10,000 waves. Xianhao drew out the darking sword, and also displayed the void sword technique. Also, it was the ultimate move Void Wave. The two ultimate moves collided and burst out endless void waves. Yi Guqian's body shook violently and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. However, he still moved forward and did not take a step back. If he took a step back today, it would be a blasphemy to Yi Guqian's sword principle. Xianhao also did not take a step back, but blood also flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Physical strength was not Xianhao's strong suit, but he had the void sword essence, so he was somewhat immune to this kind of space-shaking sword move. Although he was also injured, it was not very serious. Sword essence? Then let's compete again. At this moment, Yi Guqian's sword essence had turned into a demon. A fierce blood-red sword essence surged out and rushed to the 9 heavens. The Shura sword will, which was filled with intense killing intent, swept out in all directions. Many of the surrounding sky prides were terrified and quickly retreated. Show me all the moves you have, lest you refuse to admit defeat when you lose. Xianhao also displayed his void sword essence to the extreme. The two peerless sword essences collided, and the void exploded. It was as if the entire world was filled with endless sword chi. Kill. There were not many words between the two, because at this moment, only by using their swords could they release all the fighting intent in their hearts. Boom. The two swords collided, and genuine chi surged out in all directions with the two of them as the origin. The battle at the top of the pyramid began. Who would be the champion of this exchange meet? Chapter 426. Everyone was watching the great battle before their eyes with rapt attention. After all, both of them were geniuses of the sword Dao and possessed exceptional sword essence. Furthermore, the two of them were from opposing forces. It could be said that they were natural enemies and were destined to be enemies. Boom, boom, boom. Yi Guqian unleashed his Azura sword essence and held the Xianming heavy sword. Although he had the Blood Prison sword and the Heavenly Demon General armor, Yi Guqian did not plan to use them. However, the Xianming heavy sword was not inferior to the Blood Prison sword. First move of the Slaying God sword technique, Blood Massacre. Second move of the Slaying God sword technique, Demon Only. Third move of the Slaying God sword technique, Underworld. Fourth move of the Slaying God sword technique, Three Paths. Yi Guqian had already mastered the God-slaying sword technique to the point of perfection. With the support of the Azura sword will, Yi Guqian was like a god of death from the 9 nether underworlds. His sword aura was like a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. More importantly, Yi Guqian's understanding of the Slaying God sword technique had deepened during the battle. Yi Guqian had comprehended the 5th move, Yama, for a long time. Yi Guqian also had some understanding of the 6th move of the Slaying God sword technique. Facing Yi Guqian's ferocious attacks, Xianhao unleashed his sword essence of the void as well as the top sword moves of the limitless sword sect. Rainbow sword technique, sword chi piercing the sun. Rain God sword technique, sorrowful rain. Xianhao used both his mystical yin and mystical yang weapons at the same time. Just like Yi Guqian, he used a sword technique with both hands. Clang, clang. Clang. When the swords collided, sword qi shot out in all directions. Yi Guqin's Xianming heavy sword was unstoppable. At the same time, the Azura sword essence's slaughter and destruction sword essence made his sword moves seem like they could break through everything. On the other hand, Xianhao's sword moves seemed to combine yin and yang. To a certain extent, they were similar to the moves of the black and white impermanents. But when Xianhao was alone, he was clearly more skilled than the black and white deities. Yi Guqin's Xianming heavy sword slashed vertically at Xianhao. The sword's momentum was as heavy as Mount Tai, and the oppressive airflow caused the void to emit a sharp explosive sound as if it was shattering. Xianhao held the profound yang sword in one hand as he blocked the sword move of the profound nether heavy sword. The terrifying strength that came from the sword caused Xianhao's expression to change as the bones in his arm faintly crackled. At the same time, he wielded the dark yin sword in his other hand. The trajectory of the sword was extremely tricky as it stabbed towards Yi Guqin from the side. Yi Guqin's cold eyes flashed. The blood-red light reflected on the faces of everyone in the gladiator arena. This move was Yi Guqin's signature move, and it was extremely powerful. In the face of Yi Guqin's move, all the remaining talents in the gladiator arena felt a faint sense of suffocation. Even Xianhao's face was slightly solemn, but he did not panic at all. As he stabbed out with his sword, the surging sword qi fluctuations were like a broken dam, as they poured out with a loud rumble. Infinite sword art, endless sword. The terrifying sword qi seemed to be endless as it traversed the sky. The fierce and vigorous sword qi shocked everyone present. It's the signature move of the infinite sword sect, the infinite sword art. Many people exclaimed. The infinite sword art was the supreme sword technique of the infinite sword sect. There were many sword moves, and each move was stronger than the last. It could be said that among all the talents in the infinite sword sect, Xianhao was the only one who had cultivated the infinite sword art. Boom! An incomparable roar spread in all directions. The violent sword waves turned into waves of ripples and rushed out. Some of the talents in the gladiator arena even hurriedly retreated. What's the result? Everyone looked at the arena immediately. Whether it was Yi Guqin's god-slaying sword art or Xianhao's infinite sword art, they were both astonishingly powerful, so they wanted to know the result. When the smoke and dust dissipated, Yi Guqin's figure was revealed. His body was covered with wounds of various sizes. Those were the injuries caused by the endless sword. The sword qi seemed to be endless, and there was no way to avoid it. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, but he still did not take a step back. On the other hand, Xianhao was not at ease either. There was blood at the corner of his mouth, and his clothes were somewhat tattered, especially the part between his thumb and index finger where he held the sword. It was broken and bleeding nonstop. Xianhao, show me your true strength. You have been hiding your true strength in the void sword realm. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. Although he did not use his full strength, Xianhao was equally unfathomable. Oh, Yi Guqin, don't worry. I won't hold back against you. Xianhao said and attacked again. In an instant, Yi Guqin felt as if everything around him had gone silent. Only Xianhao's sword was left. Infinite sword art, silent sword. Chapter 427. The ultimate sword technique was the supreme king-level sword technique of the ultimate sword sect. It was rumored that only the sect master of the ultimate sword sect, Xian Wuji, could perform the entire ultimate sword technique. Among the younger generation of the ultimate sword sect, Xianhao was the most proficient in the ultimate sword technique. When his sword came out, the surrounding sound seemed to be sucked away. This sword could actually affect Yi Guqin's soul and hearing. In an instant, Yi Guqin felt that before the sword arrived, a strong soul-shaking power surged into his sea of consciousness. If it were an ordinary person or a person with a weak soul, the sword would be stunned. This sword strike was enough to stun a person for an instant, and then take their life without a sound. But Yi Guqin was different. Not only was his sea of consciousness far stronger than ordinary people, but he also had the meteorite demonic soul butterfly, a spiritual object guarding his sea of consciousness. He was not afraid of soul-attacking methods at all. But in Yi Guqin's sea of consciousness, the meteorite demonic soul butterfly flapped its wings, and an astral soul wave spread out. It directly blocked the silent soul-shaking power of the sword. It even attacked Xianhao's sea of consciousness. At the same time, Yi Guqin also drew his sword. In his body, the purple lightning nether thunder spread along his meridians and attached to the Xianming heavy sword. The ultimate move of the horizontal lightning sword, thunder brilliance of the 9 heavens. The violent purple lightning accompanied by the surging sword qi poured out and collided with Xianhao's sword silently. The surging sword qi wave swept in all directions. Xianhao suddenly felt that his sea of consciousness was violently shaken. However, to Yi Guqin's surprise, Xianhao was not injured by the star soul wave as he had imagined. His soul consciousness became clear in an instant. This Xianhao actually has a spiritual object guarding him. Yi Guqin was slightly surprised. Since Xianhao could resist the meteorite demonic soul butterfly's astral soul wave, it meant that he also had a spiritual object guarding him in his sea of consciousness. Even if it might not be as good as the meteorite demonic soul butterfly, it was enough to resist such an attack. Indeed, within Xianhao's sea of consciousness, there was a small golden bell protecting his sea of consciousness from the attacks of the astral soul waves. Yi Guqin, you've got more and more tricks up your sleeve. If it wasn't for the golden spirit soul protecting bell in my sea of consciousness, I might have fallen for your tricks. Xianhao's eyes were cold. He thought that his silent sword would at least be able to severely injure Yi Guqin. However, he never expected that Yi Guqin's sea of consciousness would also have a spiritual item that could protect it. Their swords collided once more. At the same time, their souls began to compete. Yi Guqin's eyes were swallowed by the crimson light as he activated the Eye of Azura. With the support of Yi Guqin's powerful soul, the power of the Eye of Azura grew even stronger. Xianhao felt that countless cruel Azura illusions kept appearing in his mind like reincarnation. Yi Guqin seized the opportunity and flashed forward, his sword momentum pressing forward with an indomitable will, opening and closing wide, like Mount Tai pressing down on Xianhao. In an instant, Xianhao was under tremendous pressure. But at the same time, just as Xianhao was affected by the Eye of Azura, the golden spirit soul protecting bell in his sea of consciousness actually started shaking and trembling. Dong, dong, dong. A series of bell chimes spread out like ripples. Xianhao's sea of consciousness instantly became clear. Yi Guqin, don't think that only you have divine soul attack means. Xianhao urged the divine soul power in his sea of consciousness, spreading out along with the bell chimes of the golden spirit soul protecting bell. Golden Bell 100 Soul Wave. This was a move belonging to the golden spirit soul protecting bell. It was the same as the meteorite devil soul butterfly's astral soul wave. Bang, bang, bang. Yi Guqin's sea of consciousness released the astral soul wave at the same time. In an instant, the entire fighting arena seemed to have fallen into a divine soul storm. These two people have such powerful divine soul power. Furthermore, they both seem to have spiritual items that are protecting their sea of consciousness. When many martial artists saw the situation, their faces all carried a look of surprise and envy. The rarity of spiritual items that were protecting one's sea of consciousness was not lower than exotic fire and exotic thunder. They were similarly items that could only be encountered but not sought. However, Yi Guqin and Xianhao both possessed them. Not only that, exotic fire, exotic thunder, peerless sword intent, and other rare existences, they did not seem to lack them. This involuntarily made people sigh. How big was the gap between people? In the arena, Yi Guqin and Xianhao's battle reached the climax. The two people's true qi and divine souls were practically fully unleashed. Their true qi set off a storm, and their divine souls swept up ripples. Limitless sword art, shadowless sword. Xianhao once again displayed the limitless sword art. His figure instantly turned into an afterimage, the tip of his sword pointing straight at Yi Guqin's face. Shadow kill sword art, vanishing shadow in an instant. Yi Guqin's sword momentum condensed, then instantly exploded, his figure pulling out numerous afterimages. The speed of the two people's swords dazzled the people present. Ordinary divine soul realm martial artists could not even see the speed of their swords clearly. Clang, clang, clang. Dazzling sparks erupted from the collision of the swords. Yi Guqin raised his other hand, and the six-pulse divine sword aura burst out, piercing towards Xianhao's face. Xianhao's figure rapidly dodged, and the mystical yin and mystical yang swords in his hands stabbed out at the same time. Yi Guqin's Xianming heavy sword blocked horizontally, like a pitch-black shield, blocking Xianhao's sword momentum. Clang! Two sparks erupted, and Yi Guqin felt that a swift and fierce sword aura seemed to want to bombard him through the Xianming heavy sword. On the surface of Yi Guqin's body, an azure gold light flowed, and the impeccable Vajra body was activated to the extreme, blocking the sword aura's attack. Xianhao's expression turned serious. He felt that Yi Guqin's aura was like a mountain, unmoving and unwavering. Yi Guqin, can you really not take a step back today? Xianhao roared, and his true qi erupted like a volcano, erupting to the extreme. Limitless sword art, unstoppable sword. Xianhao's sword momentum was unstoppable, as if it was breaking through thousands of miles of waves. Unstoppable sword was truly unstoppable. Nothing could stop Xianhao's sword. You've even used this move. Yi Guqin, how can you not lose? Xiantai sneered. Feeling the strong pressure of Xianhao's sword art, all the elites present held their breaths. They knew that if they were in Xianhao's place, it would definitely be difficult for them to withstand Xianhao's extreme sword, because in the face of this sword, defense was useless. If they defended, they would immediately fall into a passive state and be oppressed by Xianhao's sword momentum. Therefore, they could only face this sword head-on. Is the sword sect going to use that move? Many people's eyes were filled with anticipation. They hadn't forgotten the sword attack that Yi Guqin had used against Gu Xiaoyang of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion on the Infinite Wasteland Plain, which had transformed into a pair of sword wings and carried a murderous aura. Although they did not know what kind of sword technique it was, everyone knew that it should be Yi Guqin's strongest move. However, Yi Guqin did not use the 10,000 God tribulation, because for him, this kind of extreme confrontation and oppression was the best time to comprehend and break through. The trajectory of the boundless heaven sword art appeared in his mind. As Xianhao's sword momentum pressed down, the cold sword qi seemed to be about to touch Yi Guqin's face. What exactly is Yi Guqin doing? Seeing that Yi Guqin did not seem to be doing anything, everyone present was in an uproar. Yan Wushuang, Zither Fairy, and the people of the Sword Sect's Talon Forest were all nervous. Only Feng Manlu had a satisfied smile on his face. Yi Guqin, how many more surprises can you bring by using your opponent's extreme sword move to oppress yourself and make a breakthrough in your swordsmanship? Feng Manlu thought to himself. At the same time, under everyone's gaze, Yi Guqin finally made a move. A light flashed in his mind. In an instant, he used the boundless heaven sword art. It was not a small unique skill or a big killing move, but an ultimate move. Boundless heaven sword art. Turn it into 1,000. When Yi Guqin struck with his sword, the sword qi of heaven and earth surged. Chapter 428. The boundless heaven sword art was the swordsmanship that Yi Guqin's father had passed down to him. It was also the swordsmanship that Yi Guqin had practiced for the longest time. However, because it was a supreme spiritual level swordsmanship, it was not easy to comprehend it and display the ultimate move. However, Yi Guqin had comprehended it for such a long time, and under the pressure of Xianhao's sword momentum, Yi Guqin finally grasped the flash of inspiration in his mind and instantly comprehended the essence of the boundless heaven sword art. The ultimate move of the boundless heaven sword art was called Infinity Transformation. Just like the name, Yi Guqin's sword seemed to have integrated into the boundless heaven world. Countless sword trajectories overlapped with each other. At this moment, Yi Guqin's entire being seemed to have merged with the world along with his sword. However, the boiling sword qi between heaven and earth was enough to show the power of infinity transformation. Boom! Unparalleled sword qi swept across all directions, hissing and splitting the earth. Even the other geniuses in the arena temporarily retreated to the four corners. They did not dare to get too close to the pyramid for fear of being affected. If they were swept by the terrifying sword qi, even an expert in the sixth transformation of the divine soul realm would be seriously injured and vomit blood. Cough. The sword qi dust swept across all directions, and all the spectators around stared at the arena intently. However, what shocked them the most was that Xianhao had actually been forced back. He coughed up blood, and his clothes were torn in many places, revealing bloody wounds. Infinity transformation was a move where countless sword chi surrounded Xianhao from all directions. If he did not have the ultimate defensive means, he would not be able to avoid being injured. Xianhao gathered the genuine qi in his body, forcibly suppressing the injury caused by the sword qi. At the same time, he looked coldly at Yi Guchen. "Are you using me to sharpen your sword?" Everyone could not help but look at Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen was also injured. There was a sword wound on his shoulder that was so deep that the bone could be seen. That was the injury caused by Xianhao's sword. This move could be said to be an exchange of injuries, but anyone with discerning eyes could see that Xianhao was at a disadvantage. The disciples of the Wuji sword sect looked a little resentful. Xiantai's face was as gloomy as water. "Being able to use you to sharpen my sword is my recognition of you. Because ordinary people are not even qualified to be sharpened by me," Guchen said truthfully. This was indeed his heartfelt words. Ordinary opponents were not qualified to be sharpened by Yi Guchen. "You." Even with Xianhao's temperament, he was still choked. The tens of thousands of spectators in the arena were speechless. After all, not everyone had the guts to say such words to a top genius like Xianhao. "He Guyueyuyu was the second one, apart from that guy, he is my second one." Xiantai's was 1-1 art on. S was heaven art of the Yu. In her eyes Xian. Of 1-1 in her eyes, of in her, Yi was in her eyes was. Yi Guchen Yu? Very good. Xianhao was atop heavenses after all, so he quickly adjusted his state of mind. It would be a fatal blow to Xianhao's reputation if he were to lose to Yi Guchen under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Xianhao suddenly took a step forward. With one step, ripples appeared in the void, and his aura rose by another level. Senior brother Xianhao actually used the 9 steps of heaven. Many disciples of the Wuji sword sect were shocked. The 9 steps of heaven was not only a movement technique, but it also had the effect of shaking the true qi in the body. With every step, his aura rose by a level, and his true qi became stronger. Rumor had it that if one took 9 steps, they would be unstoppable. With Xianhao's status, he did not need to use the 9 steps of heaven. But now, facing Yi Guchen, Xianhao truly used his technique. Yi Guchen immediately understood Xianhao's technique. He could not let Xianhao take 9 steps. Yi Guchen's heavy sword slashed out, and the violent power of lightning poured out like a tide, covering Xianhao. Wuji sword art, formless sword. The sword momentum intersected, and the air billowed. Xianhao took a second step. Boom. His sword struck out again. Wuji sword art, impermanence sword. This sword was like a dream, like an illusion, like impermanence, and it was simply difficult to figure out the sword path. Yi Guchen used the Eye of Azura again, not to use divine soul methods, but to use the Eye of Azura to capture the movement of Xianhao's sword path. Clang. This sword was blocked by Yi Guchen. But Xianhao took a third step, and his true qi skyrocketed again, his aura even stronger. Wuji sword art, impermanence sword. Whoosh, another swift and fierce sword slashed over, the sword edge cutting through the void, and a sharp whistling sound shook in all directions. Everyone understood now. Xianhao wanted to stop Yi Guchen while taking 9 steps to completely suppress Yi Guchen. With a boom, Xianhao took a 4th step again. His aura was wild and boundless, and the power of his Wuji sword art also increased by a level. But what was strange was that under Xianhao's fierce attack, Yi Guchen actually still did not retreat a step. Although his body shook, and the corners of his mouth coughed up blood, Yi Guchen still pressed forward, and did not retreat a step. Heaven-splitting sword soul, come out! Yi Guchen also did not hold back anymore, directly unleashing the 30,000 heaven-splitting sword souls in his body. The power of the heaven-splitting sword souls was greatly related to their numbers. Yi Guchen only had 10,000 sword souls before, and he already displayed such power. Now, with 30,000 sword souls, the power multiplied, and could not be mentioned in the same breath as before. Boom! 30,000 green sword souls surged out like a green wave. The fluctuations they emitted shook one's mind. At the same time, Xianhao took a 5th step. His aura was even more ferocious. his long hair dancing wildly, true qi surging, and both swords were displayed at the same time. Wuji sword art, impermanence sword. Wuji sword art, shadowless sword. The two Wuji sword arts stabbed out at the same time, the sword qi roaring wildly, tearing apart the heaven-splitting sword souls in front of him. Xianhao was like a reef in a huge wave, breaking through the tide of heaven-splitting sword souls, and charged towards Yi Guqin. Do you think the power of the heaven-splitting sword souls is only like this? Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. He controlled the sword souls to besiege Xianhao from all directions. At this moment, Xianhao seemed to be wrapped in a green sphere, and the 30,000 sword souls were densely packed within it. The entire martial arts arena was completely silent. Did Xianhao fail? Xian Tai fist frowned. Xianhao was the top genius of the Wuji sword sect. If he lost, it would be a great loss of face. Everyone else present was also watching the battle closely. Did senior brother Yi win? Some disciples of the sword sect Pagoda Forest were excited. It's not that simple. Elder Qing, he frowned slightly. With his cultivation, he could naturally sense the fluctuation. The entire arena was cold and solemn. At this moment, there was a sudden thump. The sphere formed by the heaven-splitting sword souls shook violently. Thump. There was another thump, and the heaven-splitting sword souls seemed to have been shaken off a little. It's the heaven-trampling 9 steps. Some disciples of the Wuji sword sect exclaimed. Thump. Following a violent thump, the 30,000 heaven-splitting sword souls suddenly burst into chaos. Among the sword souls in the sky, Xianhao's long hair danced in the wind. He took 9 steps directly, and his genuine qi surged. At the same time, the void sword essence erupted again. However, unlike before, an extremely illusory sword realm suddenly appeared with the eruption of his sword essence. Void Sky Ultimate Domain, come out! Xianhao shouted coldly, his aura soared to the extreme, and he directly brought out the illusory sword realm. This was the sword realm that belonged to the Void Sword Principle, the Void Sky Ultimate Domain. Chapter 429. Sword Intent, after transforming into Sword Dao, could display a Sword Dao domain. The Sword Tao field domain was like a formation or a boundary that could greatly enhance the strength of the person who used it. For example, Xia Yubing's Ice Sword Dao could display the Ice domain. There was also Yi Guqin's Azura Sword Dao's 18 layers of Azura Blood Sea. And this Void Sky Ultimate Domain was a Sword Dao domain exclusive to Void Sword Dao. Xianhao's comprehension of Void Sword Intent hadn't reached the level of Sword Dao. Therefore, the Void Sky Ultimate Domain he displayed was also extremely illusory and unreal. Even so, the might of this move was still incomparably powerful. It's actually a Sword Dao domain. Seeing Xianhao display the Void Sky Ultimate Domain, the entire arena went into an uproar. Heaven's Pride, who could comprehend sword intent, was already 1 in 10,000, and those who could form a Sword Dao domain were even rarer. Yi Guqin, do you think you can defeat me so easily? The battle has only just begun. You should be proud that you made me use the Void Sky Ultimate Domain. Xianhao said coldly. His sky-trampling 9 steps had already been fully displayed. Adding the support of the Void Sky Ultimate Domain, Xianhao's aura was unparalleled. That kind of terrifying fluctuation made some life and death chamber experts speechless. If Xianhao broke through life and death chamber, I'm afraid ordinary life and death chamber experts wouldn't be his opponent. A life and death chamber expert sighed. Sword Dao domain. Yi Guqin's eyes flickered faintly. Xianhao being able to comprehend the Void Sword Dao domain was indeed out of his expectations. However, Yi Guqin didn't show the slightest bit of cowardice. On the contrary, his battle intent increased. Only such an opponent was worthy of being defeated. Yi Guqin didn't hold back either, and the Azura sword intent gushed out from his body. He had been comprehending the Azura sword intent for a long time, and his understanding of sword intent was becoming deeper and deeper. As he displayed the Azura sword intent, the entire heaven and earth seemed to be dyed in a layer of tragic blood red. Everyone could only see boundless blood red spreading out from Yi Guqin's body. A ferocious blood red sword essence gushed out like a tidal wave. Amidst the blood-colored waves, a blood-colored 18-layer prison surged out. Azura Sword Dao Domain, Azura Blood Sea 18 levels. Boom. The two peerless sword Dao domains collided, and the resulting shockwaves were shocking. The emotions of everyone in the arena had reached the peak of excitement. In the Saint Origin dynasty, such a battle between the geniuses of the younger generation was extremely rare. The disciples of the Sword Sect, Talon, and the Limitless Sword Sect stared intently at the battle before them. It could be said that the battle between Yi Guqin and Xian Hao represented the strongest strength of the younger generation of the Sword Sect and the Limitless Sword Sect. The outcome of their battle would also show the strength of the younger generation of the two sections. In the arena, Xian Hao took a step forward, and his figure practically flashed in front of Yi Guqin in an instant. What a fast speed! Yi Guqin's heavy sword swept out. He was secretly surprised. The Void Sword essence could originally bring Xian Hao great speed, but now it seemed that Xian Hao's speed was even faster. In this virtual sky ultimate domain, my speed will be even faster. Yi Guqin, can you withstand it? Xian Hao's two swords were not only fast but also fast. The cold sword edge cut through the void, leaving behind afterimages as it stabbed towards Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin performed the protection of Luo Tian, and the guardian Vajra shadow protected his body. At the same time, he performed the God-slaying sword technique again. With the support of the Azura Blood Sea, the power of the God-slaying sword technique multiplied. The fierce blood-red sword light seemed to be able to tear the world apart as it collided with Xian Hao's sword. Waves of sword waves poured out in all directions, and at the same time, the two sword Dao domains collided with each other. The Azura Blood Sea overturned the world. The virtual sky ultimate domain covered the void. The collision of the two sword Dao domains was even more intense than the battle between Yi Guqin and Xian Hao. Although the domains were extremely illusory, their power was beginning to show. These two are both geniuses of the sword. Although they have not comprehended the sword Dao, they are able to display the power of the sword Dao domain to such an extent. It's really rare. An old sword Dao grandmaster sighed. However, Xian Tai was not satisfied with this stalemate. What he wanted was for Xian Hao to completely crush Yi Guqin. Not for such a situation. The Flame Emperor, Grandma Shichuan, Marquis Huntian, and the others looked at each other and understood. Yi Guqin's strength and talent had exceeded their expectations. If they allowed Yi Guqin to continue growing, he would definitely become another Feng Manlu. Or even stronger. Therefore, a trace of killing intent appeared in their eyes. No matter whether Yi Guqin won or lost today, they would not let him go easily. Bang! Yi Guqin and Xian Hao's swords clashed again. Yi Guqin did not retreat, but his bones cracked. Xian Hao, who was in the virtual sky ultimate domain, gave him a lot of pressure. Xian Hao's strange speed was impossible to guard against. However, Yi Guqin's sword aura was also filled with killing intent. The blood-red sword light constantly swept towards Xian Hao, causing him to suffer more injuries. Clearly, the battle had reached its climax. The two of them only had one goal in mind, and that was to defeat their opponent and take first place. Yi Guqin, what's the point of stalling? Let's decide this in one move. Xian Hao said as he gathered his true qi to the peak. Xian Hao had consumed a lot of his true qi and spiritual soul. On the other hand, Yi Guqin's true qi and spiritual soul were still abundant. The limit of his qi was not something an ordinary person could compare with. However, since Xian Hao wanted to decide this in one move, Yi Guqin did not mind accompanying him. Limitless sword art, invincible sword. Xian Hao's true qi gathered, and the strong sword qi seemed to split the sky and earth. It's actually invincible sword. Many disciples of the Limitless Sword sect cried out. Even Xian Tai's eyes flashed. Although there were many moves in the Limitless Sword art, there were only 3 moves that were really difficult to cultivate. And this invincible sword was one of the 3 moves. On the other side, the eyes of the sword sect's Talon, and the others also revealed nervousness. They could also feel the power of Xian Hao's invincible sword. Yi Guqin. Yan Wushuang clenched her jade-like hands. In her heart, her dissatisfaction with Yi Guqin had turned into worry at this moment. If Yi Guqin lost, it would undoubtedly be a fatal blow to the sword sect's Talon. Feeling Xian Hao's sword attack, Yi Guqin took a deep breath. Yi Guqin's heart calmed down at the moment when the outcome of the battle was about to be determined. He slowly raised the Xianming heavy sword in his hand, and a formless power condensed. With a boom, a pair of sword wings spread out behind Yi Guqin's back. Those were wings that were completely condensed from ferocious sword qi. Myriad God tribulation, heaven and earth extermination. Yi Guqin's sword struck out. The sword momentum seemed to want to destroy heaven and earth. The air screamed, and the earth trembled. Xianhao's sword was similarly powerful. His true qi and spiritual soul were all condensed to the extreme. It was as if this sword was really invincible. Two extreme moves collided with a loud bang. Unparalleled destructive sword qi swept out in all directions. This sword collision shook heaven and earth. Chapter 430. The entire martial arena was rumbling and trembling. The pyramid-shaped building shook violently from the collision, cracks spreading all over its surface. Is this really caused by two divine soul realm cultivators? Many of the spectators were dumbfounded. Even a battle between life and death chamber experts wouldn't be this intense. However, what everyone was most concerned about was the result. Whether it was Limitless Sword Sect or Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, from Xiantai Yiwen Manlu to ordinary disciples, everyone was looking at the arena. Smoke and dust filled the air as sword qi wantonly filled the air. After the extreme collision, there was a deathly silence. There were more than 10,000 people in the arena. At this moment, all of them seemed to be holding their breaths. The atmosphere was terrifyingly silent. This battle wasn't just a battle between Yi Guqin and Xianhao. It was also a battle between Sword Sect Pagoda Forest and Limitless Sword Sect. Yi Guqin, if you lose this battle, you won't be qualified to be Gu Zun's opponent. Yu Bufan was also paying attention to the battle. He was certain that the successor chosen by Wen Manlu was most likely Yi Guqin. If Yi Guqin couldn't even defeat Xianhao, then there was no suspense in the battle between him and Gu Zun. Gu Zun was only stronger than Xianhao. At this moment, everyone was watching at the top of the pyramid. As the smoke and dust dispersed, Yi Guqin and Xianhao's figures appeared in front of everyone. At a glance, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The reason for that was because both of their injuries were extremely frightening. On one side of Yi Guqin's chest, there was a huge wound. His flesh was torn and blood was dripping down. It was a terrifying sight. It was a terrifying wound caused by an invincible sword. If Yi Guqin's body wasn't abnormally strong, his body would have been split in half. As for Xianhao's injury, it was a piercing wound. Because the Thousand Gods Tribulation World Annihilation gathered sword qi at a single point, this wound directly penetrated Xianhao's abdomen. If Xianhao hadn't dodged in time, his heart would have been pierced. Although the two's injuries were very serious, those with discerning eyes could see it. Yi Guqin's position was the same as before, not retreating a single step. As for Xianhao, he retreated several dozen meters. This proved that Xianhao was at a disadvantage in this move. Xianhao's body trembled. His two swords stabbed into the ground as he spat out a large mouthful of blood. His face was pale as he stared at Yi Guqin. Xianhao had never been in such a sorry state before. Even in the Void Sword realm before, whether it was Xianhao or others, they only thought that it was because of the unusual thunder that Yi Guqin was able to cause such a terrible massacre. But now, Yi Guqin had indeed relied on his own strength to heavily injure Xianhao to such an extent. No one doubted the sword sect's strength anymore. Do you still want to fight? Yi Guqin forcefully endured his injuries as he raised the Netherism heavy sword and spoke indifferently. I, Xianhao, haven't lost yet. Xianhao didn't believe it, nor did he think he would lose. His limitless sword technique had yet to be fully cultivated. He still had the possibility of improving it, so how could he be willing to lose to Yi Guqin here? Again, a strong fighting spirit burst forth from Xianhao's eyes. If he admitted defeat in front of everyone and lost to Yi Guqin, it would be a stain that he would never be able to erase for the rest of his life. Swoosh! Xianhao struck out with his sword again, but everyone could see that he was barely able to continue with his injuries. Yi Guqin frowned slightly, but since Xianhao hadn't admitted defeat, he naturally wouldn't hold back either. The Netherism heavy sword struck out again, aiming straight for Xianhao. But at this moment, a figure suddenly flashed into the arena, and his right palm struck directly at Yi Guqin. This scene was so sudden that even Feng Manlu couldn't react for a moment. That was because even he did not expect that person to be so shameless. The person who flashed into the arena was Xiantai. His palm strike seemed casual, but he didn't hold back in the slightest. How terrifying was the palm strike of a divine dwelling expert. Even an ordinary life and death chamber expert would be seriously injured. Not to mention that Yi Guqin was still seriously injured. In a moment of desperation, Yi Guqin could only use the protection of all heaven and the Xianming heavy sword as a shield in front of him. Boom! Yi Guqin, who hadn't retreated a single step, was finally sent flying. He spat out a large mouthful of blood, and even the Xianming heavy sword was sent flying. The protection of all heaven was directly destroyed by the palm strike. Everyone present was dumbfounded, and their faces were filled with astonishment. Xiantai's palm strike had caught them off guard. A divine dwelling expert had directly interfered in the Heaven Pride's exchange, and even sent Yi Guqin, who had the upper hand, flying with one palm. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Yi Guqin. Lord Yi, Senior Brother Yi, Yan Wushuang, Zither Fairy, and the disciples of the Sword Sect Forest Pagoda cried out in surprise. Feng Manlu instantly flashed and caught Yi Guqin. Feng Manlu, who had always been calm and collected, had a grave expression on his face at this moment. Feeling the uproar around him, Xiantai's face also stiffened. But he had no choice because anyone with discerning eyes could see that Xianhao's condition was worse than Yi Guqin's. If this continued, Xianhao would be the one to lose. But Xianhao was the chief heaven pride of the Limitless Sword Sect, and also the representative of the Sun Moon Hall, so he couldn't lose. Therefore, Xiantai had to intervene even if he had to. However, he wouldn't openly accept everyone's disdain. Xiantai coldly snorted and said, Yi Guqin harbored evil intentions towards Xianhao and instigated Xianhao to fight to the death. This is an exchange, and no one's life is allowed. But Yi Guqin turned a deaf ear to it, so I stopped him. His words made the whole place fall silent. How could he be so shameless? Many people's faces were filled with astonishment, and anyone could see that. It wasn't Yi Guqin who instigated Xianhao. He was just asking, but Xianhao stubbornly refused to admit defeat, and wanted to fight to the death. Now, according to Xiantai's words, Yi Guqin harbored evil intentions, and wanted to kill Xianhao. Isn't that too shameless? Gongsun Xiaoye said angrily. Although she wasn't familiar with Yi Guqin, she still had some righteousness in her. She wasn't the only one. Most people thought the same, but because of Xiantai's status, no one dared to say it out loud. Xiantai's eyes were cold. He didn't need to explain much. He just needed an excuse. But then, something even more shocking happened. Granny Shichuan of Lingxi Divine Palace stood out and said indifferently, Palace Master Xian's words are reasonable. I also think that Yi Guqin is perverse and murderous. If we didn't stop him, it would be hard to guarantee that he wouldn't kill him. I also agree. Fortunately, Palace Master Xian is benevolent and intervened. Otherwise, someone would have died in today's exchange. Yan Emperor of 3 imperial palaces also stood out. I think that Xianhao should take first place in this exchange. Yi Guqin's personality is too extreme. He doesn't deserve to take first place, Marquis Huntian of Xingyuan Academy said. Since Princess Yuan Shi and the others couldn't take first place, they might as well do the Limitless Sword Sect a favor. As the Divine Palace experts of these factions spoke out, the whole arena was in an uproar. Shameless. The eyes of the people of the Sword Sect's Tower Forest turned red, and they gritted their teeth. Was this the behavior of a lofty Divine Palace expert? Chapter 431. It was no wonder that the Sword Sect Tower Association was so furious. It was because Xiantai, Grandma Shichuan and the others had gone too far. Xiantai had shamelessly attacked and severely injured Yi Guqin, who had a chance of winning. In their eyes, Yi Guqin was murderous, while Xiantai was benevolent. Even if they were twisting the truth, they wouldn't go so far. Shameless. Not only the disciples of the Sword Sect Tower Association, but even Qing He and the other elders couldn't suppress the anger in their hearts. Their clenched fists trembled. However, what made the hearts of the disciples of the Sword Sect Tower Association turn cold was that other than the 9 profound sect, the other 7 great forces were on the same side as the limitless sword sect. Even Yu Bufan of the Sealed Blade Royal Hall had a complicated look in his eyes. He didn't stand on the same side as Xian Tai and the others, but he also didn't stand on the Sword Sect Tower Association's side. In fact, it was already good enough that Yu Bufan could guarantee that he wouldn't go against the Sword Sect Tower Association. After all, the Sealed Blade Royal Hall had also suffered heavy losses in the Void Sword realm. Yu Bufan purely wanted to know if Yi Guqin had the ability to fight against Gu Zun. But now, Yu Bufan sighed. Whether Yi Guqin could overcome the current crisis was another matter. In addition to the 7 great forces, there were also super clans like Gongsun and Shintu. But they tactfully didn't express their opinions. These super clans wouldn't interfere in the grudges between the 7 great forces. Even Shintu Miao of the Shintu clan sneered. So what if Yi Guqin was talented? Before reaching the divine dwelling stage, he could only be bullied and humiliated. He couldn't resist at all. Xian Tai seemed to have sensed the strange calmness in the entire arena. There was a hint of coldness at the corner of his mouth as he said, Yi Guqin, don't be resentful. I am teaching you to restrain your killing intent. Some of the spectators couldn't bear to hear Xian Tai's words. How could a young genius of the sword sect have to endure such humiliation? That Yi Guqin must be exploding with anger. It wasn't easy for him to get first place, but he's about to hand it over to someone else, and he doesn't even have the ability to resist. On the Saint Origin Academy's side, Princess Yuan Shi, who had once been trampled under Yi Guqin's feet, gloated. Sigh, I've long said that having talent and strength is nothing more than the bravery of an ignorant man. Yi Guqin, when will you understand this principle? Zhou Tong was dressed in white, fanning himself with a fan as he shook his head. There was a sense of superiority in his words, as if Yi Guqin was just a brute. In addition, Xian Feng, Xian Dai, Ren Tingting, and the other geniuses who had been severely injured by Yi Guqin were all sneering. They couldn't wait to see Yi Guqin's grief and indignation. However, out of everyone's expectations, Yi Guqin did not feel any anger, resentment, or lament the injustice. He just took out a sage-to-be elixir with healing effects from his origin ring and swallowed it. After all, Xian Tai didn't hold back at all. Even though he had the perfect physical body, the flawless diamond body, the protection of Luo Tian, and the defense of the Xianming heavy sword, he was still severely injured. It could be said that if it were any other heaven pride, they would have either died or been crippled by Xian Tai's attack. Xian Tai's vicious heart was evident. However, outsiders only knew that Xian Tai had casually attacked, but they didn't know how terrifying his attack was. Yi Guqin, let me do it, Feng Manlu said calmly. However, Yi Guqin could hear a trace of extreme coldness in his voice. Feng Manlu, who had always been gentle and rarely got angry, was really angry this time. Senior Feng, wait, I still have something to do. To Feng Manlu's surprise, Yi Guqin stopped him for the time being. He slowly walked to the side of the Xianming heavy sword, picked it up, and then slowly walked to the top of the pyramid. With each step, he left a bloody footprint. That is, when the crowd saw the bloody footprints left behind by Yi Guqin, they were all shocked to the core. It seems that Xian Tai didn't just casually attack. Although Yi Guqin was also severely injured when he fought with Xian Hao, it shouldn't be this heavy. Some of the more observant people also saw the clues. It wasn't a casual attack, it was a move to take Yi Guqin's life. Xian Tai's eyes flickered slightly. He didn't understand what Yi Guqin wanted to do now. Yi Guqin walked up slowly, one step at a time. The bloody footprints behind him made everyone sigh in their hearts. Obviously, no matter what the result was, the name of Sword Sect Yi Guqin would once again resound throughout the Saint Origin dynasty. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Guqin was only one step away from the platform at the top of the pyramid. He turned his gaze to Xian Hao. His tone was still calm as he asked, Xian Hao, do you still want to fight? Xian Hao was stunned when he saw this. At this point, Yi Guqin still had the strength to fight? However, Xian Hao wasn't someone who would admit defeat. It wasn't his intention for Xian Tai to attack. However, since Yi Guqin had spoken, Xianhao naturally wouldn't hold back. Just as he took a few steps forward, Xiantai suddenly stood in front of him and said, "Xianhao, don't be fooled. Yi Guchen obviously wants to fight to the death with you." "Palace Master Xian, I won't lose." Xianhao frowned slightly, his eyes filled with unwillingness. "Don't worry, Yi Guchen won't be able to walk out of this arena today." Xiantai secretly transmitted his voice. Xianhao's expression changed slightly. He glanced at Yi Guchen, then measured the injuries on his body. If Yi Guchen fought to the death with him, he would definitely be the one at a disadvantage. "Do you dare?" Yi Guchen continued to ask. Xianhao's expression froze. In the end, he didn't answer. It wasn't that Xianhao didn't dare, but that he didn't think it was worth it. "Looks like you don't dare." Yi Guchen slowly shook his head, a hint of disappointment in his eyes. He had finally found an opponent, but the result was disappointing. Yi Guchen looked around. The prodigies who had lost to him were all staring at him with a sneer, as if they were watching a good show. The real winner in the end had become the target of ridicule. Yi Guchen ignored them. Stepping on the blood-soaked ground, he walked step by step to the top of the pyramid. At this moment, even Xiantai couldn't stop him because Feng Manlu was there. Moreover, Yi Guchen had already challenged Xianhao. Since Xianhao didn't answer, the final winner would naturally be Yi Guchen. No matter how they tried to twist the truth, this was the undeniable truth. Dong. Dong. The footsteps were like war drums, shaking everyone's hearts. Yi Guchen left bloody footprints with each step and finally stepped onto the top of the pyramid. At this moment, there was a ray of light in the sky. It broke through the thick clouds and shone on the top of the pyramid. It landed on the young man who was holding the Xianming heavy sword, and was covered in blood. The tens of thousands of people present held their breaths, as if they were waiting for something. Yi Guchen stood at the top of the pyramid with his heavy sword erected on the ground. Although his clothes were stained with blood, they were still so dazzling. First place will be disrespectful. Chapter 432. Yi Guchen's voice was very calm. However, it contained a trace of arrogance, like the unyielding pride of a sword cultivator. His words were like a sudden clap of thunder that resounded throughout the entire martial arena. At this moment, almost everyone's gaze fell on the youth standing at the top of the pyramid. He was covered in blood and looked very miserable. However, at this moment, his figure was so dazzling. Yi Guchen. Yan Wushuang slightly raised her swan-like beautiful snow-white neck. At this moment, Yi Guchen's figure, who was standing at the peak, was really too dazzling. This caused the usually arrogant Yan Wushuang to involuntarily feel a little ashamed. Other than her father, Yan Chang'e, and Feng Manlu, there was finally a third man who could subdue Yan Wushuang. Senior brother Yi. The eyes of all the disciples in the Sword Sect Pagoda were red. Yi Guchen fought so hard for the reputation of the Sword Sect Pagoda, and even suffered from Xiantai's shameless attack. Even so, Yi Guchen was seriously injured and slandered, but he still wanted to win first place. This was his obsession. Born as a Sword Sect master, a disciple in the Sword Sect Pagoda shouted with red eyes. Born as a Sword Sect master. As if a chain reaction, all the disciples in the Sword Sect Pagoda shouted, feeling indignant for Yi Guchen. Ridiculous. Xiantai smiled coldly as he looked at the disciples in the Sword Sect Pagoda, not caring at all. However, at this moment, some sporadic voices began to shout in the martial arts arena. Then, it spread out like a wildfire in a prairie. Born as a Sword Sect master. Gongsun Xiaoye screamed. Gongsun Xuanlong's expression changed slightly, but he sighed and did not say anything. Because this time, the limitless sword sect had gone too far. Born as a sword sect master. In the end, almost everyone in the arena, except for the limitless sword sect and other forces that were enemies of Yi Guchen, shouted loudly. They were simply paying their respects to Yi Guchen, the swordsman, and feeling indignant for him. The thunderous roar swept across the entire martial arena like a tidal wave. It even spread outside the martial arena. Almost half of northern Liang City could clearly hear the roar. In the arena, when Xiantai saw this, his expression also became unsettled. He could ignore the sword sect's actions, But now, other than the few factions that were targeting Yi Guqin, everyone else was loudly shouting the sword sect's name. This was an irresistible trend. This proved that Yi Guqin's reputation in everyone's hearts had reached a peak. Xian Hao's face darkened. Now, Yi Guqin stood at the top of the pyramid. His body was bathed in light, and he was incomparably dazzling. But not many people would remember the second place. However, Xian Hao was relieved in the blink of an eye, because he knew that Yi Guqin had yet to pass the trial of death today. Yi Guqin's expression was calm when he saw everyone's gaze converging on him, and heard the cheers of the sword sect. He was the sword demon, and his heart was as calm as an ancient well. He did not like fame and fortune. Therefore, he was not happy about the cheers of tens of thousands of people. The only reason he was obsessed with winning the first place today was to help the sword sect's tower. After all, he was a disciple of the sword sect's tower, and had enjoyed many opportunities in the sword sect's tower. Now was the time to repay them. Although the price of repayment was not small, feeling the serious injuries in his body, Yi Guqin sighed softly in his heart. Fortunately, he had taken out the sage-to-be pill from the bronze cauldron. Otherwise, his injuries would have been even more serious. But fortunately, Yi Guqin had achieved his goal. Now even the Limitless Sword Sect and some other factions had to admit that Yi Guqin was first place. Xian Hao was close behind and ranked second. The third place was LV Qinghan. As for the fourth place, Leng Ju and the others originally had a chance, but because they had been severely injured by Yi Guqin, Zhou Tong easily took it. But Zhou Tong's face did not look too good. Before the exchange began, he had confidently said to Zitherfairy that he could guarantee to be in the top 3. In the end, because of Yi Guqin's sudden appearance, he only took 4th place. This result was not good in the middle. Moreover, Zitherfairy's gaze had been fixed on the figure standing proudly at the top of the crowd. Yi Guqin, do you think you can walk out of the arena easily today? The glory will only last for a moment. Zhou Tong's face did not change, but his heart was cold. As the results of the exchange came out, the entire arena was in an uproar. Yi Guqin deserved to be first place. However, although the exchange had ended, everyone present had a tacit understanding, and did not choose to leave, because they knew that the waves this time were far from over. Feng Manlu, now that the exchange is over, shouldn't the Sword Sect's tower give us an explanation? Xian Tai's voice was accompanied by the vast pressure of a divine dwelling expert, causing the entire noisy arena to fall silent again. Everyone's heart tightened. They knew that today's matter would not end well. You want the Sword Sect's tower Lin to give you an explanation? Feng Manla's tone was very calm. But those familiar with Feng Manla's character knew that the more he did not show his anger, the more terrifying he was. Yi Guqin caused so much trouble in the Void Sword realm. It was rumored that he was dead, but since he's still alive, shouldn't you give us an explanation? Xian Tai's tone was ice-cold, tit for tat. That's right, the 3 imperial palaces also want an explanation. My poor disciple died to Yi Guqin's despicable methods. The Yan Emperor of the 3 imperial palaces also stepped forward, releasing the pressure of a divine dwelling expert. The same goes for my Shengyuan Academy. Marquis Huntian stepped forward, his eyes cold. Don't forget that my disciple, Pan Xuelian, also died tragically at the hands of Yi Guqin. I heard that she suffered inhuman pain before she died. Yi Guqin must apologize. I want him to kneel in front of Pan Xuelian's tomb. Granny Shichuan also stepped forward. Her tone was ice-cold. She even wanted Yi Guqin to kneel in front of Pan Xuelian's tomb. Yi Guqin's eyes were incomparably cold. Pan Xuelian was a vicious woman. What value did she have to make Yi Guqin kneel? At this moment, the 4 divine dwelling experts spoke in unison. They wanted to pressure the Sword Sect's tower Lin. To everyone's surprise, Yu Bufan of the Sealed Blade King Hall, who had a deep grudge with the Sword Sect's tower Lin, did not step forward to make things difficult for them. Although he and Feng Manlu were opponents, they appreciated each other's talents and did not want to step forward to add insult to injury. As for the Sword Sect's tower Lin's side, only Sect Master Qing Yang of the 9 Profound Sect was on the same side. Shameless. Don't you know what the disciples of the major forces did in the Void Sword realm? You clearly wanted to take advantage of your numbers to besiege senior brother Yi and junior sister Mu to seize the opportunity. Don't tell me you don't allow others to resist? An inner courtyard disciple who had participated in the Void Sword realm couldn't help but shout. It was clearly those forces who coveted Mu Xingzu's opportunity and had besieged her. Yi Guqin had no choice but to intervene in order to protect Mu Xingzu. However, those people were still unwilling to let go. They were simply unwilling to let go. If Yi Guqin had been soft-hearted and not ruthless, the ones who would have died in the end might have been Yi Guqin and Mu Xingzu. If that had been the case, would the Limitless Sword sect and the other forces care about the deaths of Yi Guqin and the others? As a result, the major forces had suffered great losses. Therefore, they blamed Yi Guqin for all of this. Not to mention the Sword sect's Tower Lin. Even the majority of the people present felt that the major forces were being unreasonable. But so what? Divine dwelling experts had the confidence to invert right and wrong. Feng Manlu placed his hands behind his back as he sensed the heavy atmosphere. Although he was only at the spiritual bridge stage, he was able to withstand the pressure of the 4 divine dwelling experts. I only have one thing to say. Xiantai, do you want to cripple your right hand or do you want me to cripple it personally? Chapter 433. Feng Manla's tone was incomparably calm, as if he was talking about something very normal. However, the moment these words were spoken, the entire martial arts arena fell into a dead silence. Asking Xiantai, a divine dwelling expert, to cripple his own arm, or personally cripple his arm, let alone those at the spirit bridge stage. Even those at the divine dwelling stage wouldn't dare to speak to Xiantai in such a tone. Although Xiantai had broken through to the divine dwelling stage not long ago, his strength wasn't that simple. He wasn't considered weak among divine dwelling experts. If Feng Manlu was still the Sword King of the divine dwelling stage, no one would be surprised to hear such words. After all, Feng Manlu's strength was considered top tier among divine dwelling experts, and crippling Xiantai's arm wouldn't be a big deal. However, Feng Manlu was only at the spirit bridge stage now. It wasn't as simple as fighting someone at a higher cultivation level. He had to completely defeat Xiantai in order to cripple his arm. Some of the experts present, especially those who had attained the spirit bridge of heaven and earth, were astonished. They knew best how big the gap between them and the divine dwelling stage was. Oh Feng Manlu, do you know how laughable your words are? Xiantai laughed in anger. He couldn't do anything to Feng Manlu with his half-step divine dwelling stage cultivation in the heavenly wasteland plains. However, after breaking through to the divine dwelling stage, Xiantai's confidence had swelled, and he no longer placed Feng Manlu in his eyes. Not only Xiantai, but Marquis Huntian, Yan Emperor and Grandma Shichuan also snorted disdainfully at Feng Manlu's words. How arrogant were Xiantai to challenge a divine dwelling stage expert with his spirit bridge stage cultivation, and even cripple his arm. Feng Manlu, I'll give you 2 choices. The first is to hand over Yi Guqin, or the second is for me to personally take action. Xiantai stood in the air as the pressure of the divine dwelling stage poured out in all directions. When everyone saw this scene, they all sighed inwardly. If Feng Manlu hadn't lost his divine dwelling to that mysterious person 10 years ago at the Forbidden City Peak, his current cultivation would be far from what it was now, and he wouldn't be someone that a mere Xiantai could challenge. Feng Manlu's expression was calm. His character had always been gentle. If it were any other time, Feng Manlu would have laughed it off. But this time wind-sweeping building couldn't just brush it off. Xiantai's intervention had severely injured Yi Guqin, which was unforgivable for wind-sweeping tower. Not only was Yi Guqin injured, but he was also provoking the Sword sect's tower forest. Wind-sweeping building could ignore other people's slander, but it couldn't ignore the reputation of Yi Guqin and Sword sect Talon. Yi Guqin is my successor, and he will replace me at the Forbidden City to fight against Yu Bufan's successor, Gu Zun. Therefore no one is allowed to touch him today. Feng Manlu stepped into the air, his voice echoing throughout the arena. As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. The summit of the Forbidden City. No wonder. Who would have thought that the obscure Sword King's final choice would actually be Yi Guqin? The Forbidden Purple Summit is the most famous place in Saint Origin dynasty for the duel. Every duel would attract the attention of the entire dynasty, and even several neighboring dynasties. 10 years ago, I was fortunate enough to witness the duel between the sword and the saber at the Forbidden City. That duel overturned the heavens and earth, and even the sun and moon paled in comparison. I will never forget it for the rest of my life. Following Feng Manlu's words, the entire arena was in an uproar. Many life and death threshold experts and heaven and earth spiritual bridge experts had witnessed that duel. That was why they were shocked. 10 years had passed, and the duel between the sword and the saber would take place again at the Forbidden City. This was definitely a major piece of news that would cause great waves in Saint Origin dynasty. Today, Feng Manlu had announced to the public that Yi Guqin would replace him as the successor of the Forbidden City. Everyone knew that Yu Bufan's choice was only Gu Zun, the saber maniac. Sword sect and saber maniac. Many people began to look forward to it. However, they knew that Yi Guqin hadn't passed the death threshold yet. If he couldn't pass it, everything would be in vain. As for Yan Wushuang, after hearing Feng Manlu's words, a complicated look flashed across her beautiful eyes. Becoming the successor of Feng Manlu had always been her goal in cultivation. However, Yi Guqin's performance had indeed convinced her completely. Therefore, she only sighed in her heart. She didn't have any feelings of dissatisfaction or jealousy. Hearing the uproar, Yi Guqin was the calmest. He had already expected it, so he wasn't surprised at all. Feng Manlu, do you think I'll let bygones be bygones just because he's your successor? Today, I will make him pay the price. No one can stop me. If you interfere, I don't mind having one less sword king in this world. Xian Tai's tone was cold and arrogant. His words enraged all the elders and disciples of Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Xian Tai was completely condescending towards Feng Manlu. You're wrong. Feng Manlu faintly shook his head. Xian Tai frowned slightly. I'm not begging you to let Yi Guqin go. I'm warning you. Feng Manlu didn't say anything else and directly made his move. Feng Manlu took a step forward. His imposing manner didn't show the slightest bit of anger. Compared to Xian Tai's vast divine dwelling stage pressure, Feng Manlu was like a small boat in the vast sea. Feng Manlu, since you overestimate yourself, don't blame me for not showing mercy. Xian Tai's eyes were filled with cold mockery. He couldn't wait for Feng Manlu to make a move. How happy would it be to trample the once invincible Sword King under his feet in front of so many people? However, was that really the case? Feng Manlu's face remained calm. He still didn't bring out a divine weapon, and only used his fingers as a sword. As he pointed his finger, the void boiled violently and countless rays of sword chi spread out. As soon as he made his move, Xian Tai's eyes flashed with surprise. Its power far exceeded the offensive power of an ordinary heaven and earth spirit bridge stage expert. But Xian Tai still didn't care. In his eyes, a divine dwelling stage expert should be able to crush a heaven and earth spirit bridge stage expert. Yin Yang Sword Seal. Xian Tai also didn't bring out a sword. Instead, he pinched a sword seal. 2 rays of sword chi, one white and one black, spread out, turning into a 100-foot-long sword of chi that cut through the world. Its power was so strong that it made people's hearts tremble. Is this the power of a divine dwelling stage expert? Many people were speechless, their hearts trembling. Even the people on the sword sect's side were sweating for Feng Manlu. Feng Manlu could be said to be the belief of all the disciples of the sword sect. If he was defeated, it would definitely be a big blow to the sword sect. In the face of Xian Tai's move, Feng Manlu's figure was like a graceful swan, and his fingers were like a sword. With the point of his finger, tens of thousands of swords swept out. The void shattered, and sword chi swept across. Boom. Berserk sword chi spread out in all directions. Feng Manlu didn't fall into the slightest disadvantage against Xian Tai. How is this possible? How can your sword move be so powerful? Xian Tai couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that even if he broke through to the divine dwelling stage, he still couldn't crush Feng Manlu. I've long said that the divine dwelling stage is just so. At this moment, Feng Manlu was dressed in a simple cloth robe, and his posture was elegant. His whole person seemed to have turned into a sword. The person was the sword, and the sword was the person. 10 years of accumulating a sword, and the frostblade has never been tested. Today, I will use the blood of a divine-dwelling stage expert to baptize my sword. As Feng Manlu spoke, a green longsword seemed to emerge from his body. The sword chi was magnificent, cutting the heavens above and shaking the underworld below. With one sword, the heavens trembled. Chapter 434. At this moment, all the spectators in the arena were looking at Feng Manlu, who was standing in the sky. A green longsword emerged from his body. The strangest thing was that the sword was not real, but translucent. It spread out from Feng Manlu's body and instantly grew to a height of 100 feet. Feng Manlu was in the center of the green sword, like the king of swords. That's the divine wind sword. Yu Bufan's eyes narrowed. As Feng Manlu's opponent, he was very familiar with the green longsword. It was Feng Manlu's personal sword, the divine wind sword. Feng Manlu had actually fused his former sword into his body. He was the sword, and the sword was him. This was called the union of man and sword. Yi Guchen, who was watching the battle, was also amazed. Feng Manlu had been in seclusion in the sword sect pagoda for 10 years. Not only had he comprehended the union of man and sword to a very high level, but he had also merged his own sword into it. At this moment, Feng Manlu's entire body was the divine wind sword. The divine wind sword was his body. Yi Guchen instantly felt that this was similar to the forbidden forging technique, which used the human soul to refine the sword. Everyone in the arena was shocked, and Xiantai's eyes were filled with disbelief. Feng Manlu, who had brought out the divine wind sword, gave him an extreme sense of danger. How is this possible? You're only at the spiritual bridge stage. Xiantai also brought out his own sword. As the sword slashed out, the terrifying true chi of a divine-dwelling stage expert surged out and swept across the sky. However, Feng Manlu did not move at all. He casually stepped out, and the divine wind sword moved with his body. Why do we need to compete in the sword Dao? 1,000 fingers, 10,000 seals. Can you ask for the pinnacle of the world? 3 feet of autumn water untainted by dust, unparalleled in the world. Feng Manlu recited a poem in his free time, and his sword danced in the sky. With a point of his finger, the divine wind sword cut through the sky, and the clouds in the sky changed color. A green sword radiance seemed to have merged with the wind, drawing a ripple in the void. Mark of wind. Feng Manlu's 3 words, the winner and loser. Puff. A right arm, along with blood splattering out. The blood of a divine-dwelling stage expert stained the divine wind sword, making the sword's edge even more cold. The entire martial arena was in a state of stunned silence. Before Xiantai could even react, his right hand that was holding the sword had already disappeared. This. Xiantai was completely dumbfounded, unable to think. Just now, when Feng Manlu pointed his finger, he could only vaguely see a green sword shadow attacking him. Then, his right hand that was holding the sword was separated from his body. What kind of speed was this? Not to mention the others, even all the elders and disciples of the sword sect pagoda forest were incomparably stunned. Many of the disciples had only heard of wind-sweeping buildings' glorious past, but had not witnessed it with their own eyes. Therefore, they did not know the true strength of wind-sweeping building. They had no idea that Feng Manlu, who was always in seclusion in the sword sect pagoda and had a gentle temperament, would be so powerful and terrifying. This arm once injured a disciple of my sword sect pagoda forest. Now it's crippled. Feng Manlu's tone was cold and indifferent. With his hands behind his back, he stood in the sky. The shadow of the divine wind sword could be vaguely seen on his straight torso. It looked extremely sharp and extraordinary, and it was full of loftiness. Previously, when Yi Guchen stood at the top of the pyramid, he shone with boundless radiance. But now Feng Manlu, who was leisurely reciting poems and cutting off the arm of a divine palace expert, was unparalleled under the heavens with his sword. Once. Now. The lightless sword king, Feng Manlu, was still as powerful as ever. Feng Manlu, sweeping up the yellow sand, dancing with the sword in spring and autumn, his name shakes the world. Someone exclaimed in amazement. 10 years ago, When Feng Manlu had appeared out of nowhere, someone had praised Feng Manlu's unparalleled sword skills with this poem. After 10 years of silence, he appeared again today, cutting down a divine palace expert with one sword, shocking the world once again. Do you still want to ask me for the person? Feng Manlu's tone was as calm as water. His empty eyes swept across the Yin Emperor, Marquis Huntian, Grandma Shichuan, and the others. Feng Manlu, you. Grandma Shichuan and the others were stunned, their faces alternating between green and white. They had been so arrogant before, twisting black and white. Grandma Shichuan had even wanted Yi Guqin to kneel in front of Pan Shuoyan's tomb to repent. But now, Grandma Shichuan and the others felt as if their necks were being strangled. They couldn't make a sound. Their faces were red with anger, but they didn't dare to say anything. Their strength was comparable to Xiantai's. Xiantai had been utterly defeated by Feng Manlu. They didn't stand a chance either. Grandma Shichuan and the others' eyes flashed. They seemed to want to attack together. Feng Manlu's face was calm, as if he didn't care about their alliance. At this moment, Sect Master Qingyang stepped forward. Although he didn't say anything, his attitude was obvious. Grandma Shichuan and the others' faces sank. If Sect Master Qingyang were to intervene, then their alliance would be meaningless. Xiantai was in a daze. His left hand was clutching his severed arm. Previously, he had used his right hand to strike out and severely injure Yi Guqin. And now his right arm had been severed. Xiantai gritted his teeth so hard that they almost shattered. His face was so dark that it was terrifying. Feng Manlu, your cultivation has returned to the divine dwelling stage? Everyone else also pricked up their ears. If Feng Manlu's cultivation hadn't reached the divine dwelling stage, how could he have so easily severed Xiantai's arm? Feng Manlu indifferently said, "Do I need a divine dwelling stage cultivation to kill you?" Feng Manlu's words made Xiantai groan in anger. He almost vomited 3 liters of blood. Everyone in the arena was speechless. Although Feng Manlu had been silent for 10 years, his arrogance hadn't diminished in the slightest. However, Yi Guqin was the only one who had observed the battle the most carefully. After all, he had a deep understanding of the sword. Coupled with the sword demon's vision, he was able to see the clues. First of all, it was because Feng Manlu's understanding of man and sword had reached an extremely profound level. After comprehending man and sword as one, he was invincible among those of the same level, and even had the ability to challenge those of a higher level. Second, the quality of the divine wind sword was most likely not low. It had reached the pinnacle of divine rune weapons. After 10 years of nourishment in Feng Manlu's body, the sword's power could shake the 9 heavens when it was unsheathed. Third, the grade of the sword move, Wind Mark, wasn't low either. Yi Guqin estimated that the power of Wind Mark was most likely close to the level of an emperor-level sword art. An ordinary king-level sword art couldn't be compared to Wind Mark. Even Yi Guqin's god-killing sword art was most likely only the final 6th move could compete with Wind Mark. In addition, Feng Manlu had thoroughly comprehended the Wind Sword Dao. Together with Wind Mark, Feng Manlu's sword was as fast as a ghost. It was as though it was shuttling through the void, leaving Xiantai no time to react. Yi Guqin finally understood why Yin Wushuang was able to comprehend the wind sword intent. It turned out that she had inherited it from Feng Manlu. What Feng Manlu had comprehended was the complete wind sword Dao, which was more powerful than the wind sword intent. All these reasons combined allowed Feng Manlu's sword to directly cut off the arm of a divine dwelling stage expert. This sword could be said to be an interpretation of the true essence of Feng Manlu's sword Dao. It was impossible to measure the power of this sword with one's cultivation level. Xiantai's defeat wasn't unjustified. Chapter 435. Even Yi Guqin couldn't help but praise Feng Manlu's Wind Mark. It was a perfect fusion of man and sword as one, as well as the Wind Sword Dao. It could also be said to be a move that maximized the speed of the sword. Even from the perspective of Yi Guqin's sword demon, this sword move was very stunning. Feng Manlu was indeed worthy of his title as the King of Swords. Feng Manlu blocked all the attacks by himself. Although he didn't exert any pressure, Xian Wushuang and Xian Wushuang were still shocked. Even so, Granny Shichuan and the other divine-dwelling experts had ugly expressions on their faces. They didn't dare to do anything excessive. This was the superiority brought by strength. As long as you were strong enough, no one would dare to refute you even if you tried to distort the truth. If you weren't strong enough, you wouldn't be able to defend yourself even if you were in the right. At this moment, Yi Guqin's will to chase after the strongest became even stronger. He knew that his cultivation might be one of the best among the younger generation. But it wasn't enough when compared to the true experts. I need to be stronger, Yi Guqin thought. He wasn't the kind of person who was used to relying on others. Even if Feng Manlu helped him this time, what about the next time? True confidence came from one's own strength and foundation, not from external forces. Since none of you have any objections, this exchange is over, Feng Manlu said indifferently. He had previously asked Grandma Shichuan and the others if they still wanted to capture Yi Guqin, but no one dared to reply. Since that was the case, Feng Manlu didn't want to waste any more time. After all, Xian Tai had already paid the price of an arm. Feng Manlu turned to Yi Guqin and said, Yi Guqin, I only cut off Xian Tai's arm. Are you unhappy? Feng Manlu didn't try to hide his words, nor did he lower his voice. His words could be heard throughout the arena. The noisy crowd fell silent once again. Some of them were dumbfounded. Did Feng Manlu really want to kill Xian Tai? Although he did have the ability to do so, given the strength he had displayed. Xian Tai's face was cold to the extreme. He gritted his teeth, and his body was trembling because of his anger. Feng Manlu didn't take him, a divine-dwelling expert, seriously at all. However, Xian Tai had never taken Feng Manlu seriously before. Now that their identities were reversed, Xian Tai found it hard to accept. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. He shook his head and said, Thank you, Senior Feng, for standing up for me. However, there is no need for that. This is my personal grudge. I will settle it myself in the future. Yi Guqin's tone was very natural and calm, as if he was talking about something very normal. However, this caused the entire martial arts club to fall into a deathly silence. With his divine soul cultivation, he dared to say that he would personally deal with the divine-dwelling expert in the future. However, there wasn't the slightest bit of arrogance in his tone, as if it was a matter of course. This, as expected of the Sword King's successor. He really has the arrogance of someone from the same bloodline. Some people were dumbstruck and bitterly smiled. However, they weren't too suspicious. Given the talent Yi Guqin had displayed so far, if he did not die prematurely, there was indeed a possibility for him to become a divine-dwelling expert in the future. Little bastard. Xian Tai's face turned purple. It was one thing for Feng Manlu to speak like that, but even a junior at the divine soul stage dared to look down on him. This caused Xian Tai's killing intent to soar. Feng Manlu said indifferently, Xian Tai, I'm warning you. If you dare to lower yourself and kill Yi Guqin, I, Feng Manlu, will be the first to kill you no matter where you are. He paused for a moment, then continued in a clear voice that spread throughout the entire martial arts arena. I, Feng Manlu, will not only say this to Xian Tai, but also to all forces and people at the divine soul stage and above. If anyone dares to attack Yi Guqin, I, Feng Manlu, will not show any mercy. Feng Manlu's voice was calm, but it was as mighty as an imperial edict. He had said that no force or expert could kill Yi Guqin. Of course, Feng Manlu would naturally not interfere if they were of the same generation and level. Yi Guqin knew that Feng Manlu was guaranteeing him that he would not be threatened by Grandma Shichuan and the others. As expected, the eyes of Grandma Shichuan and the other divine-dwelling experts flickered. With Feng Manlu's words, it was unlikely that they would personally deal with Yi Guqin. At least on the surface, no one would dare to casually attack Yi Guqin. Good, very good. Feng Manlu, Sect Master will not let you off so easily. Xian Tai's face was extremely cold. The Sect Master he spoke of was naturally Xian Wuji. As the Sect Master of the Limitless Sword Sect, his cultivation could be said to be at the top of the divine dwelling stage. You can go back and tell Xian Wuji that I have to thank him. If he had not secretly attacked me 10 years ago in the Violet Forbidden City, I would not have been able to comprehend the unity of man and sword in the Sword Sect Pagoda. Feng Manlu said indifferently. These words were like a heavy bomb that caused an uproar in the entire arena. Many people began to ponder. Some of them had heard that the mysterious masked man who had secretly attacked Feng Manlu after the battle in the Violet Forbidden City, causing Feng Manlu's divine dwelling to be destroyed, was the sect master of the Limitless Sword sect, Xian Wuji. Of course, because there was no clear evidence and the Limitless Sword sect refused to admit it, not many people believed it. But now that Feng Manlu had personally said it, did it mean that this was the truth? Feng Manlu, I admit that you're not weak, but that's not a reason for you to slander me. The sect leader is so narrow-minded. Why would he stoop so low to attack you? Ridiculous. Xian Tai's eyes flickered, but he was in a hurry to refute. Let alone outsiders, even he, the Sun Moon Hall master, did not know whether Xian Wuji was the culprit or not. However, it was not impossible. But Xian Tai wanted to protect the reputation of the Limitless Sword sect and Xian Wuji, so he would not admit to it. Feng Manlu shook his head. He did not mind. He would have an end to this matter, but not now. At this point, the competition had come to an end. However, everyone knew in their hearts that the Sword Sect's Tower Forest was the one that truly shocked the world in this exchange. After the exchange, there were only two names that could be spread out. The Sword Sect, Yi Guqian. The Sword King, Feng Manlu. As for the Limitless Sword Sect, regardless of whether it was the top genius, Xian Hao, or the Sun Moon Hall master, Xian Tai, their reputations would be damaged. Especially Xian Hao, who had dominated the dynasty and was undefeated. However, just when everyone thought that the competition had finally come to an end, a figure appeared in the arena. Outside the arena, there was a figure dragging a corpse as he slowly stepped into the arena. At this moment, most of the people in the arena were focused on Yi Guqian, Feng Manlu and the others. But when the figure appeared in the arena, almost immediately, there were people who looked at him. Then their eyes were filled with surprise. More and more people's gazes shifted to that figure. That corpse is from the barbarian tribe. I didn't expect him to come, and he even brought a corpse from the barbarian tribe. What's the meaning of this? Many people looked at the figure, then turned to Yi Guqian. It seemed that his arrival was not a coincidence. Instead, they were targeting Yi Guqian, who had a great reputation. Chapter 436. Looking at the figure who was dragging the barbarian's corpse, the noisy arena quieted down. It was a young man with a slender figure. He was wearing the 9 Serenities dragon armor, which was black and translucent. There were spiritual tattoo formations engraved on the armor, with amazing defensive power. Obviously, it was an excellent defensive divine weapon. His hair was as black as ink and his face was handsome. His lips were thin and slightly pursed. There was an indescribable domineering aura around him, as if he was a battle king. He was holding a blood-stained golden overlord halberd in one hand, and dragging the barbarian's corpse with the other. The ground was stained with blood as he walked. The person who came was none other than the leader of the 3 imperial palaces, the young war emperor, Yang Haotsong. As one of the top geniuses of the 3 imperial palaces, he was also one of the top geniuses of the Saint Origin dynasty. Previously in the Void Sword realm, he had proudly said that Ji Yan, who was killed by Yi Guqian, only had 1/10 of his strength. However, not many people doubted his words because the young war emperor was publicly acknowledged as the strongest genius. He wasn't ranked first in terms of cultivation, but in terms of combat strength. This meant that the young war emperor possessed a rare offensive strength. Not to mention other aspects, it was hard to find someone who could match him in terms of combat strength. After all, his master, the war emperor of the 3 imperial palaces, was also an unparalleled divine palace expert. The reason why the young war emperor was late wasn't because he wanted to be late. It was because he received a message from Zhou Tong. With Zhou Tong's shrewdness, he didn't want Yi Guqian to become famous today. Therefore, he needed someone to suppress him. Zhou Tong wouldn't do it himself, so he could only secretly send a message to the young war emperor. Zhou Tong knew the young war emperor's unruly character. He naturally wouldn't let go of the chance to clash with Yi Guqian. At this moment, the young war emperor looked around and said coldly, "Looks like I missed a good show." Yang Haotsong. Why did you only come now? If you weren't late, would the first place of the exchange be taken by a mediocre person? Yin Emperor suddenly said. His words were filled with sarcasm. Obviously, he was saying that if the young war emperor wasn't late, the first place of the exchange would be him and not Yi Guqin. The word mediocre was incomparably piercing. The sword sect's forest of pagodas stared coldly at the flame emperor. Right now, Yi Guqin was practically the signature of the sword sect pagoda forest. Insulting Yi Guqin was equivalent to insulting the sword sect pagoda forest. Flame Emperor, watch your words, Feng Manlu said indifferently. The Flame Emperor's face stiffened. However, he had no choice but to shut his mouth as he felt extremely aggrieved. A divine dwelling expert was actually threatened by the World Spirit Bridge. The little war emperor's eyes flickered slightly. Zhou Tong had already told him about this matter in his message. The reason why I've come late is because I want to do my best to attack the barbarian race. I'm not like some other forces. They're trying their best to fight for the first place. That would only make them look ridiculous. After the young war emperor finished speaking, he threw the corpse of the barbarian tribe out and said in a clear voice, "This is the bone demon, holy son of the bone barbarian tribe." On the way here, he passed by a city and saw this man leading a group of bone barbarian tribe's totem warriors on a killing spree, so he killed him. The young war emperor's tone and expression were indifferent, as if killing a saint was just a small matter. However, this caused a huge commotion in the arena. That was a barbarian tribe's holy son. Although there were differences in cultivation between the barbarian tribe's holy sons and holy daughters. But no matter what, since he was a holy son, he must have some outstanding strength. He definitely wouldn't be killed so easily. Even if it was a top-notch genius, it would be extremely difficult for him to kill a barbarian tribe's holy son. The young war emperor casually killed a holy son, and spoke in such an indifferent tone. Everyone was shocked. However, there were also people who noticed the young war emperor's words. When he said that he would do his best to fight for the first place, he was undoubtedly mocking Yi Guqin. What was even more amazing was that the young war emperor mentioned that he was trying his best to eradicate the barbarian tribe. In addition, he brought the corpse of the bone demon holy son, which made people unable to refute him. This was equivalent to letting everyone think that the young war emperor was a righteous person, who didn't care about participating in the exchange just to kill the barbarian tribe. And Yi Guqin became a despicable person who fought for the first place for fame and fortune. It seems like what the young war emperor said is true. Although Yi Guqin is worthy of respect, it's for the sword sect's tower forest. The young war emperor killed the barbarian tribe for the dynasty and the ordinary people. Some people were like fence-sitters and whispered to each other. Feng Manlu frowned slightly when he saw the faint discussion, but he wouldn't argue with a junior. On the other hand, Yin Wushuang, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xie and the others felt that the young war emperor's words were too harsh. Yang Haotsong, why didn't you say such words when you won the first place in the exchange? Now that Yi Guqin has won the first place, are you so jealous? Yen Wushuang couldn't stand it anymore and said coldly, "Ha! What a pity. The sword sect's tower forest genius, who is as famous as me, is now in the second place and speaking for someone else." The young war emperor was cold and disdainful. He didn't care about Yen Wushuang's words at all. Instead, he wanted to sow discord. Yen Wushuang was speechless. Yi Guqin frowned slightly. The young war emperor seemed to be incomparably overbearing, but he was actually as shrewd as Zhou Tong. Moreover, Yi Guqin could feel that the young war emperor's strength was indeed formidable. However, Yi Guqin couldn't allow others to slander the sword sect's tower forest's reputation. Is it very powerful to kill a barbarian tribe saint? Yi Guqin stood out and said lightly. As soon as he said that, the whispers in the arena instantly stopped. They all looked at Yi Guqin. Sword sect, you're wrong. Although you're from the sword sect, you can't insult Brother Yang's achievements. The barbarian tribe's saint isn't that easy to kill. Zhou Tong took a step forward and said while waving his folding fan. Since the young war emperor had stood out to suppress him, he naturally had to support him from the side. Yi Guqin, you're really a frog at the bottom of a well. I guess you haven't even met a barbarian tribe's totem warrior, let alone know how powerful the barbarian tribe's saint is. Princess Yuan, she said sarcastically. She was once stepped on by Yi Guqin, so she naturally hated Yi Guqin. She was just worried that she couldn't find a chance to deal with Yi Guqin. Now that the young war emperor was here, she could vent her anger, even if it was just to disgust Yi Guqin a little. Yi Guqin, the young war emperor, killed the barbarian tribe's saint. It's a great achievement. You only know how to fight among yourselves. How can you be so ruthless to us who are on the same side? Rin Tingting, who had fainted after being kicked by Yi Guqin, had also regained her consciousness. She sneered at Yi Guqin. I'm not on the same side as you. Moreover, I don't think that killing the barbarian tribe's saint is a big deal. Yi Guqin said indifferently. Yi Guqin, although you've won first place in the exchange, you can't be so arrogant. Do you think that killing the barbarian tribe's saint is a big deal? Grandma Shichuan scolded coldly. It's just the ignorant words of a junior. Yan Emperor, Lord Huntian, and the others also scolded Yi Guqin, as if they were scolding an incompetent junior. At this moment, even some people in the arena looked at Yi Guqin with a slightly different gaze. Killing the barbarian tribe's saint was a great achievement, and a great kindness. What more a saint? It was inappropriate for Yi Guqin to say such words. Even Yan Wushuang and the others were anxious. Yi Guqin just said something wrong. Yan Wushuang explained. Oh, now you're looking for an excuse? The young war emperor said coldly. I didn't say anything wrong. Killing the barbarian tribe's saint isn't a big deal, Yi Guqin said. Yi Guqin. Yan Wushuang glared at Yi Guqin. She was helping Yi Guqin out of his predicament, but Yi Guqin didn't appreciate it. Yi Guqin didn't care about Yan Wushuang's hint. His face was calm as he wiped his origin ring. A command medallion carved from blood jade appeared in his hand. It was the saint token he had picked up after killing the Xueling saint. Because I've killed a saint before, I don't think that killing a saint is a big deal. Or is it that this year's casual actions are actually a world-shaking matter? Everyone fell silent when they heard this. Chapter 437. Everyone's expression froze as they stared at the token in Yi Guqin's hand. It's the saint's token. Some people exclaimed. Some of the higher-ups of the barbarian tribe, such as the saint, saintess, priest, elder, and so on, had their own identity tokens. These identity tokens were their personal belongings. Even if they died, they would be buried with them. It was impossible for them to lose or abandon them. Since this saint's token appeared in Yi Guqin's hand, it was obviously impossible for him to have picked it up or given it to him. There could only be one reason. Yi Guqin had to kill the Holy Sun with his own hands to obtain the Holy Sun token. At the thought of this, many people who were fence-sitters lowered their heads in shame. They thought that Yi Guqin had done his best to win first place in the exchange. In the end, he had already fought with the barbarian tribe, and even killed a saint. Yan Wushuang's face was a little red. She realized that she had underestimated this sword master again. She thought that Yi Guqin had said something wrong and wanted to help him out. In the end, he really spoke the truth. This made Yan Wushuang feel a little embarrassed. She couldn't help but glance at Yi Guqin. This guy never played by the rules. The faces of those who had spoken against Yi Guqin were burning at this moment. Princess Yuan, she once said that Yi Guqin was a frog at the bottom of a well who had never even seen a totem warrior. In the end, the saint's token was like a heavy slap to her face. Rin Tingting also looked a little resentful. She thought that she could hit him when he was down, but in the end, she was the one who was humiliated. As for Zhou Tong, although he was a shrewd person who didn't show his emotions, he also looked a little unnatural. Obviously, he didn't expect that Yi Guqin had also killed a saint. To think that he had previously said how difficult it was to kill a saint, and that killing a saint would be a great achievement. In the end, wouldn't Yi Guqin have the same achievement now? When he thought up to here, Zhou Tong pondered for a moment and said, I never expected that the sword sect would actually possess such ability. It's truly praiseworthy. However, killing a holy sun is no small matter. I hope that Senior can verify the authenticity of the Holy Sun medallion. Zhou Tong was really puzzled. How did Yi Guqin kill a saint without a sound? He was a little puzzled. Zhou Tong, what do you mean? Yin Wushuang glared at him. Very clearly, Zhou Tong felt that Yi Guqin's Holy Sun token might not necessarily be real. Yi Guqin's brows also furrowed slightly. He could sense that Zhou Tong was targeting him. However, other than Ji Yan's enmity with Zhou Tong, there shouldn't be any other grievances between him and Zhou Tong. Moreover, Yi Guqin didn't think that Zhou Tong and Ji Yan's relationship was that good. Why is Zhou Tong targeting me? Is it just because of the grudge between the three imperial palaces? Yi Guqin thought to himself. However, since they had reached this point, a senior at the life and death chamber stepped forward and verified Yi Guqin's Holy Sun medallion. This Holy Sun medallion should be real. Looking at his identity, he should be the blood barbarian tribe's Xueling Holy Sun, said the senior. With that, the fact that Yi Guqin had killed a Holy Sun couldn't be refuted. Grandma Shichuan and the others' faces turned ashen. To think that they had berated Yi Guqin before. Thinking that he was arrogant and didn't care about the Little War Emperor's achievements. Now that Yi Guqin had also made a contribution, the Divine Palace experts were speechless. Yi Guqin, since you've killed a Holy Sun, why didn't you report it? Could it be that you're deliberately toying with us? The Flame Emperor said angrily. He thought that the Little War Emperor's achievement of killing a Holy Sun would suppress Yi Guqin's reputation. In the end, it made Yi Guqin's reputation even greater. I've said before that I don't think that killing a Holy Sun is a great achievement. It's just something I did casually. Therefore, I naturally didn't have any intention of publicizing it. If I had known earlier, I might have acted like the Little War Emperor and showed it off. Yi Guqin said indifferently. When these words came out, many inner courtyard disciples in the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas revealed mocking smiles. These words were like a ruthless slap to the Little War Emperor's face. He had dragged the Holy Sun's corpse over, but now he was showing off. The Little War Emperor's face also turned solemn. However, his temperament wasn't that shallow and he was able to keep his composure. However, there was no doubt that he was the one who had lost face today. Yi Guqin, what's the point of speaking so quickly? Do you dare to fight with me? The Little War Emperor waved the Overlord halberd in his hand, and an unparalleled gale poured out in all directions. The Little War Emperor was definitely a top-notch genius. He was on par with Xianhao, LV Qinghan, Guzun and the others. Are you lying through your teeth? Didn't you see Yi Guqin's injuries? Yen Wushuang stepped out and shouted coldly. Yi Guqin was injured in the battle with Xianhao and was heavily injured by Xian Tai's palm strike. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Yi Guqin's condition wasn't good, and he needed to rest. However, the Little War Emperor actually dared to issue a challenge at this moment. I didn't ask you. The Little War Emperor shouted coldly and his black eyes fell on Yi Guqin. This is too unfair. Does the Little War Emperor still have any shame? Gongsun Xiaoya said angrily. There were many people who had the same thoughts as her. Yi Guqin was already heavily injured, and he still had the face to issue a challenge. Your martial path is to take advantage of others when they are in danger? Yi Guqin said coldly. The heart of martial path is to press forward courageously. Even if you are heavily injured, you still have to fight. This is the heart of an expert. It seems like Yi Guqin, you're retreating? The Little War Emperor stared coldly, and then shook his head in disappointment. Yi Guqin, I thought you would be a strong opponent for me, Yang Haotsong. But now, you don't even have the courage to fight. How disappointing. In the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas, Yin Wushuang and the others were so angry that their teeth were chattering. If you have the guts, you should also be heavily injured and then fight with senior brother Yi when he is in his peak condition. Do you dare? Some inner courtyard disciples said angrily. I, the Little War Emperor, will fight to the end even if I have to bleed my last drop of blood. The Little War Emperor said arrogantly. The inner courtyard disciples were completely speechless. It seemed like even if the Little War Emperor had to lose his face today, he still had to suppress Yi Guqin's spirit. If Yi Guqin didn't accept the challenge, even if everyone knew that it was because he was heavily injured, it would still lessen their impression of Yi Guqin. This was the plan that Zhou Tong had secretly suggested to the Little War Emperor. Yi Guqin, you only have two choices now. First, you don't accept the challenge, which will leave a bad impression on others. They will think that you are a coward. But if you accept the challenge, you will be completely defeated by Yang Haotsong in your current state. It will be even more miserable. How do you deal with this move? Zhou Tong waved the folding fan in his hand, and a faint smile appeared in his eyes. He was known for his shrewdness and scheming. With just a small trick, he had already forced Yi Guqin into a passive state. Not only Zhou Tong, everyone in the square was also paying attention to Yi Guqin. They all wanted to know how Yi Guqin, who was heavily injured, would handle the pressure from the little war emperor. Feeling their gazes, Yi Guqin's face remained calm. He said indifferently, "If what you said is true, that I Yi Guqin won first place because of internal strife, why don't we have a competition against the barbarian tribe? Let's see who can kill more saints." Chapter 438. Yi Guqin's words shocked everyone in the arena. Competing to see who could kill more saints? Was he treating the barbarian saints like pigs? Although the barbarian saints and saintesses were both strong and weak, they had awakened the supreme totem. None of them were easy to deal with. In the past battles between the top prodigies of the 7 major forces and the barbarian saints and saintesses, it was not the barbarians who were at a disadvantage, but the prodigies of the 7 major forces. Not only were there ordinary saints and saintesses in the barbarian tribe, but there was also a double crown king, who was a triple crown king. It was said that there was a quadruple crown king among the barbarian tribe, who was extremely powerful. Even the top prodigies did not dare to say that they could kill a saint as a condition of the competition. Yi Guqin, do you think you are invincible just because you killed a saint by luck? Have you seen the real prodigies of the barbarian tribe? Princess Yuan, she did not like Yi Guqin's arrogant tone. The ignorant are fearless. You are so confident just because you killed a saint, Ren Tingting said coldly. They all thought that Yi Guqin was lucky to kill the saint of Xueling. The saint of the barbarian tribe was not so easy to kill. They did not know that Yi Guqin had killed the holy son of Xueling so quickly that he was not injured at all. Okay, although you don't dare to fight with me, it doesn't matter. We will compete according to what you said, lest people say that I Yang Haotsong bullied you. Then let's set a limit of 1 month. After the war with the barbarian tribe, we will count the merits every month. We will come again next month and see who killed more saints and saintesses. The young war emperor also accepted Yi Guqin's challenge without hesitation. But when he said this, it sounded as if Yi Guqin did not dare to compete with him, so he could only help Yi Guqin. I really want to punch that little war emperor in the face. Yi Xia curled his lips unhappily. Me too. Chu Qingqi nodded in agreement. The young war emperor was indeed asking for a beating. However, his strength was indeed enough to overwhelm his peers. He saw that the sword sex Yi Guqin and the junior war emperor, Yang Haotsong, had agreed to a duel. The spectators in the entire fighting arena were also somewhat moved. Some of them even began to consider placing their bets to see who would win. However, the majority of the people were still optimistic about the young war emperor. It wasn't that they thought Yi Guqin was weaker than the young war emperor. Instead, Yi Guqin was severely injured. According to their calculations, it would take at least half a month for him to recover from his injuries. How many saints and saintesses would they be able to find in the remaining time? Even if he found them, would he be able to kill them all? On the other hand, the young war emperor was in his peak condition, and could make full use of this 1 month's time. No matter what, he would gain much more than Yi Guqin. Thus, to many people, the outcome of this competition was more or less certain. However, what everyone didn't know was that Yi Guqin's recovery speed far exceeded that of ordinary people. Moreover, he had been hit by the Blood Barbarian tribe's kill talisman. It had only been a few days since the 1-month deadline. As long as Yi Guqin stepped out of the safe area outside northern Liang City, the saints and saintesses of the Blood Barbarian tribe would attack him. Yi Guqin's strange fire and strange thunder were the ultimate weapons that could completely restrain the Blood Barbarian tribe. Therefore, Yi Guqin proposed this duel because he was fully confident of winning. It was ridiculous that Princess Yuan Shi, Ren Tingting, and the others still thought that Yi Guqin was overestimating himself. Only Zhou Tong frowned slightly. He didn't believe that Yi Guchen would rashly propose such a duel condition. Yi Guchen, what are you planning? Or are you sure you will win? Zhou Tong thought to himself. He was probably the person in the entire fighting arena who looked down on Yi Guchen the least. Since it's a duel, it's a bit boring without a stake. I, the young war emperor, will bet a green wood heart, a divine item of the wood element. I wonder if Yi Guchen has something of the same value? The young war emperor thought that he already had the upper hand and wanted to expand the benefits. He immediately took out a divine item that was about the size of a fist and looked like a heart. It shone with green light like a green pith. It's a rare divine item of the wood element. The young war emperor's green wood heart caused an uproar. In the land of 5 elements of the barbarian tribe, the most famous treasures were the 5 elements divine items. They were divine items that contained the elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. They were greatly beneficial to martial artists who practice martial arts of the same element. For example, if a martial artist of the wood element obtained the green wood heart, his cultivation speed would increase exponentially. The 5 elements divine items were rare treasures that were hard to come by. They were extremely rare even in the land of 5 elements. Yi Guchen's eyes lit up slightly because he felt that the wood azure dragon totem in his 5-colored golden core was trembling slightly. Could it be that the 5 elements divine items are helpful for the awakening of the 5-colored totem? This unexpected discovery made Yi Guchen slightly happy. After awakening the 5-colored totem, one could comprehend the corresponding sword essence. If one comprehended the 5 ordinary sword essences of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, when combined together, it would be the peerless 5-element sword essence. It seems that in order to help awaken the Azure Dragon Totem, I must obtain the Greenwood Heart. Yi Guchen thought to himself and then said, Okay, then I'll bet a quasi-sage elixir and a leaf of enlightenment. After saying that, Yi Guchen also took out a quasi-sage elixir and a leaf of enlightenment. These 2 treasures were also rare items. Together, they were worth about the same as the Greenwood Heart. These treasures would tempt even the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth experts. The competition this time was going to be interesting. Everyone was thinking that the losing side would not only lose their reputation. Since the bet has been made, then it's settled. Yi Guchen, don't disappoint me. If the gap is too big, I will feel bored. The young war emperor said indifferently, and then turned to leave. I will be here in a month. Queen Yuanxi, Ren Tingting, Lungju, Xianfeng, Xiandai, and the others looked coldly at Yi Guchen. They could not wait to see Yi Guchen's miserable state of losing his reputation and treasures in a month's time. At this point, the exchange had come to an end. However, what happened in the exchange would obviously spread throughout the Great Desolate Prefecture, and then the Saint Origin dynasty. After the meeting, Zhou Tong still wanted to invite Zither Fairy to House Yunyan for a gathering, but was rejected by Zither Fairy. Now, she was only worried about Yi Guchen's injuries. I'm sorry, I still have something to do. Zither Fairy chased after the crowd of Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Zhou Tong took a deep breath and did not lose his composure. Sigh, Zhou Tong, your love rival has appeared. LV Qinghan walked up and sighed. Senior sister LV, I think Yi Guchen doesn't seem to care about junior sister LV. Is junior sister LV's wishful thinking? Zhou Tong said indifferently. I will ask about this matter. Yi Guchen has no feelings for junior sister LV, but he still made junior sister LV so infatuated. I will advise Yi Guchen to break off his relationship with Zither Fairy, and let her find her own happiness. LV Qinghan said. Thank you, senior sister. Zhou Tong cupped his fists and smiled meaningfully. Chapter 439. The Sword Sect's Talon and the others protected the heavily injured Yi Guchen as they left the arena. Almost as soon as he left the arena, Yi Guchen's body suddenly shook, and then he spat out a mouthful of blood. He had been forcefully suppressing his injuries in the arena earlier. Now that he had relaxed a little, they immediately erupted. Intense dizziness assaulted his mind, and Yi Guchen's body fell to the side. At this moment, a beautiful figure suddenly flashed forward and supported Yi Guchen's body. Some of the surrounding inner court disciples were dumbstruck when they saw Yan Wushuang, who almost immediately went forward to support Yi Guqin's body. When had they ever seen a proud and cold girl like a phoenix take the initiative to support someone? Moreover, it was someone of the opposite sex. However, their gazes soon turned into playful gazes. I didn't see anything. Yixia turned his head to the side. I didn't see anything either. Chu Qingqi couldn't help but tease. You, Yan Wushuang's exquisite face, which usually contained a trace of indifference, also had a rare faint blush. The contrast in personality and attitude caused Yan Wushuang to have an even more astonishing charm at this moment. Nearby, Zither Fairy, who was about to rush over, suddenly stopped as a faint bitterness appeared on the corners of her mouth. She didn't continue forward and instead stood guard. As for Bai Zichen and Wang Xiaotian, they were at the very back of the inner court disciples. If Bai Zichen's reputation in the inner court had suffered a blow before, then he was now completely ignored. It was impossible for a person who fled at the last moment and smeared the name of the sword sex Talon to be accepted by the inner court. Looking at Yan Wushuang, who was supporting Yi Guqin, and the blush on her face, the flames of jealousy in Bai Zichen's heart erupted like a volcano. At this moment, Elder Qing he walked towards the two of them with an extremely cold expression. The two of you have done such a shameful thing this time. Even the first elder can no longer care about the two of you. Lord Feng Manlu has already instructed me to inform the two of you that the two of you have already been expelled from the inner court and can only become outer court disciples. This is already benevolence. After Elder Qing he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Their faces instantly sank to the bottom of the valley. Being banished to the outer campus meant that their rankings in the second and third place were no longer useful. They would no longer have the chance to obtain the special privileges and resources of the inner campus. Bai Zichen, it's all your fault for egging me on. I hate you. Wang Xiaoyan's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Bai Zichen. If it weren't for Bai Zichen's words, he might not have run away. Bai Zichen's entire body was trembling. He could no longer hear Wang Xiaoyan's words. His handsome face had long been distorted by deep hatred. Yi Guqin, you stole my fame, my reputation, my woman, my everything. Why? Bai Zichen's face was twisted and ferocious. His otherworldly indifference had long been tossed out of his mind. The only thing left in his heart was his hatred for Yi Guqin. However, he did not reflect on himself. Could it be that the source of all this was not himself? Had Yi Guqin ever taken the initiative to target him? Whether it was the impersonation of one Sword Cliff sword scar, or the provocation of the ranking battle, it was Bai Zichen who courted death first. Yi Guqin had never cared about him. While Bai Zichen was furious, he did not know that Zhou Tong, who was dressed in white, was looking at him indifferently in the distance. The corners of his mouth revealed a wisp of a scheming smile. Yi Guqin, you can't escape my scheme. Zhou Tong's gaze was deep. The people of the Sword Sex Tower Forest returned to their inn. Yi Guqin, Ji Ling, Yuan Mie and the other heavily injured disciples also received the safest care. Everything that happened in the martial arena had long since spread throughout northern Liang City. It would not be long before it spread throughout the entire Great Desolate Mansion, and even the entire dynasty. Northern Liang City, in an inn. When Xiao Wanru heard that the dead sword sex Yi Guqin had appeared at the martial arena exchange, her mind exploded. Her mind seemed to explode, and an uncontrollable joy spread from the bottom of her heart. Although she had never seen the Sword Sex Tower Forest, she had long since regarded him as the epitome of her other half in her heart. Therefore, when she heard that not only was Yi Guqin not dead, but he had also suppressed all the heroes in the martial arts exchange, and was an unparalleled genius, Xiao Wanru was so excited and unable to contain her joy. She hurriedly returned to the guest room and told the news to Xiao Lai and Madame Xiao. Father, mother, guess what news your daughter heard? The sword sex Yi Guqin is not dead. He's still alive. That's great. Xiao Wanru originally had the temperament of a noble lady, indifferent and gentle. However, she could not help but cheer at this moment, revealing the innocence of a young girl. When Xiao Lai and Madame Xiao heard this news, they were also slightly speechless, but they did not have any reaction. Daughter, what are you so excited about? A genius like the sword sect has nothing to do with us. His survival is not beneficial to us. Madame Xiao curled her lips. A person like the sword sect was in existence at the peak in Madame Xiao's heart. Even Shen Tu Miao could not compare to him. However, so what? He was not related to them at all. They were not people of the same world. Say, do you think that little brother Yi will? At this moment, Xiao Lai thought of the mysterious young man with the bamboo hat, and could not help but make a guess. Madame Xiao and Xiao Wanru's expressions froze. Then, Madame Xiao clutched her stomach and laughed loudly. Husband, your joke is too funny. That brat is the sword sect. Isn't it too whimsical? Madame Xiao laughed until tears were about to come out of her eyes. Xiao Wanru, on the other hand, was somewhat suspicious and slightly nervous. It can't be true, right? Madam, what are you laughing at? How can you be sure it's not true? Xiao Lai asked. Although that brat's strength is not bad, it is absolutely impossible for him to reach the level of a sword sect. Moreover, isn't he a blacksmith? Have you heard of a sword sect blacksmith? Madame Xiao shook her head. She felt that Xiao Lai's imagination was really rich. I see. Indeed. Xiao Lai sighed. The legendary sword sect that was unparalleled in the way of the sword was indeed not a blacksmith. Moreover, with the talent that little brother displayed in forging, it is absolutely not something that can be learned in 10 days or half a month. He must have gone through a long period of forging training. However, I have never heard of a sword sect having talent in forging. Xiao Lai shook his head. He also felt that his own thoughts were somewhat laughable. Although Xiao Wanru was somewhat disappointed, she was also unexpectedly relieved. If that young man was really Yi Guchen, then wouldn't her intestines turn green with regret? Wanru, don't think too much about the sword sect. The Shinta clan is about to send out wedding invitations. You will marry into the Shinta clan in a month. In the future, you will serve young Master Shinta obediently. Do you understand? Madame Xiao exhorted. Xiao Wanru bit her lip and nodded as if she had accepted her fate. Chapter 440. In the blink of an eye, more than 7 days had passed since the exchange. In these 7 days, the 7 forces had divided their battle zones and opponents according to their rankings. The Sword Sect Tower Forest had chosen the Water Tribe and the Wood Tribe as their opponents. They were both barbarian tribes that were more gentle. Especially the Wood Tribe, they loved peace and were the peace-loving barbarian tribe. The Fire Tribe, the Thunder Tribe, and the Gold Tribe were the war-loving barbarian tribe. It could be said that the Sword Sect Tower Forest would not suffer heavy casualties like the previous few times. All the credit was given to Yi Guchen. It could be said that Yi Guchen's reputation in the Sword Sect Tower Forest was second only to Feng Manlu and the other 2 divine dwelling stage experts. Even the reputation of the inner court elders was not as good as Yi Guchen. After the exchange, there was another thing that everyone was interested in. It was the duel between Yi Guchen and Yang Haotsong. One of them was a sword sect master who was unparalleled in the way of the sword. The other was the Little War Emperor, who was invincible in battle and defeated his peers. It could be said that these 2 top heavens prides had their own reputations. Now that they had set up a duel with the condition of killing the chosen, everyone was amazed by their generosity. It was because of this that the duel was so eye-catching. After the exchange, the Little War Emperor began to investigate the barbarian tribe's movements and began to attack. On the other side, Yi Guchen was still in a coma. Many people were not optimistic about Yi Guchen's chances. In terms of time, Yi Guchen was in an absolute disadvantage. Moreover, he did not know when he would fully recover from his injuries. Yi Guchen didn't wake up until 10 days after the exchange meeting. In a quiet room of an inn, Yi Guchen opened his eyes. He got up to check his body's condition. The situation was better than Yi Guchen had expected. His physical body's recovery ability was very strong. With the help of the flawless Vajra body and the quasi-sage pill, he could feel his body's recovery ability. Furthermore, Yi Guchen could feel that his body had been nourished by true qi. It was obvious that Feng Manlu had used true qi to heal his injuries while he was unconscious. As for the Thunder Disaster Sword and the 5-colored golden core, they would automatically sink into the deepest part of Yi Guchen's dantian when perceived by the outside world. Therefore, Feng Manlu did not discover them. He also did not deliberately explore the secrets in Yi Guqin's body. With all these reasons added together, Yi Guqin's injuries had mostly healed. After a few more days of recuperation, he would more or less recover. Although I've suffered heavy injuries during this exchange, I've also gained a lot, Yi Guqin thought to himself. His boundless Kiliakosm sword art had finally reached the level of transformation, and he had comprehended the ultimate killing move, boundless Kiliakosm. Moreover, he had also comprehended the void sword technique to the perfection of martial arts, and comprehended the void 10,000 ripples. Most importantly, he could finally start to practice the superior king's level sword art, Great Void Sword Wave, which he had obtained from the sword pavilion in the void sword realm. Yi Guqin believed that this king's level sword art would not disappoint him. Just as Yi Guqin was thinking, there was a knock on his door, and a girl's cold voice sounded. "Are you awake?" Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows slightly. "Please come in." The door was pushed open, and Yan Wushuang entered with a bowl of medicinal porridge. Her figure was slender, and the ice silk soft armor fit her perfect curves perfectly. Her pair of stunning long legs glowed with an ivory white luster, perfectly straight and round. Her delicate face was slightly red, not because she was shy, but because she was a little ashamed. There was a hint of complexity in her beautiful eyes. "Drink the medicinal porridge. It's better for your body." Yan Wushuang handed the medicinal porridge to Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin looked at Yan Wushuang in surprise. He was used to Yan Wushuang's arrogant and indifferent character, so he could not adapt to her sudden change. Yi Guqin nodded slightly, took the medicinal porridge, and drank a mouthful. His face froze. Yan Wushuang was a little nervous, biting her red lips. "You made the porridge?" Yi Guqin said after swallowing a mouthful. "Yes." Yan Wushuang, who was originally arrogant and strong, was a little embarrassed at the moment, and her cheeks were a little hot. "It tastes terrible," Yi Guqin said truthfully. "You." Yan Wushuang's face froze, and she stamped her feet with a little embarrassment. It was the first time for someone like her, who had never done chores, to make porridge for someone, but she received such an unromantic evaluation. Looking at Yan Wushuang, who was acting like a little girl, Yi Guqin was also surprised. He did not expect Yan Wushuang to have such a side. However, the preconceived idea still made Yi Guqin have no good impression of Yan Wushuang. But he still drank the medicinal porridge. "Thank you," Yi Guqin said indifferently. As if she could hear the distance in Yi Guqin's words, Yan Wushuang clenched her hands and said, "Yi Guqin, I know that because of my stubbornness and my desire to become Uncle Feng's successor, I was biased against you and hurt your self-esteem." "You are wrong," Yi Guqin said indifferently. "What?" Yan Wushuang did not understand. "You have never hurt my self-esteem, because I have never cared about your attitude," Yi Guqin said in a calm and casual tone. These words made Yan Wushuang's mouth bitter. It turned out that Yi Guqin had never cared about her from the beginning to the end. He had never cared about her coldness and arrogance. Now that Yan Wushuang thought about it, how ridiculous and arrogant she was when she thought that Yi Guqin's true qi was crippled and his strength was weak. However, the person who turned the tide in the current exchange meeting was not her, Yan Wushuang, but Yi Guqin, whom she had looked down upon. "I'm sorry," Yan Wushuang said while biting her lip. She knew that Yi Guqin's first impression of her had already been set, and it would be difficult to change it. "Your arrogance is not wrong, but unfortunately, you used it in the wrong place," Yi Guqin said while shaking his head slightly. "What do you mean?" Yan Wushuang asked. "As a sword cultivator, it should be the sword that is arrogant, not the person," Yi Guqin said indifferently. His words were simple, but they seemed to contain the truth. It is the sword that is arrogant, not the person. Yan Wushuang seemed to understand. Yan Wushuang had always thought that her swordsmanship was unparalleled. In fact, her true arrogance was in herself, not in the sword. "Thank you. I seem to have understood something." Yan Wushuang felt enlightened, and her mind seemed to have cleared up a little. Ahem, did I disturb you?" Chu Qingqi coughed at the door. Yan Wushuang blushed and hurriedly left. Seeing this, Chu Qingqi could not help but click his tongue and sigh. Brother Yi, I really envy you. You managed to pluck the untouchable flower of our sword-sex pagoda forest. Yi Guchen shook his head and said, let's not joke around. Brother Chu, what's the matter? There are 3 things. The first is naturally the bet between you and the young war emperor. I heard that the young war emperor immediately attacked after the exchange. It seems that he has already killed 2 barbarian saints. 2 saints. Yi Guchen's expression was indifferent. In 10 days he had killed 2 saints. The young war emperor lived up to his reputation. Brother Yi, you are still recuperating, but the young war emperor has already killed 2 saints. This? Obviously, even Chu Qingqi was a little worried about whether Yi Guchen could win the bet. Brother Chu, you don't have to worry about this. Yi Guchen did not care and was not in a hurry. The second thing is about the Shinto family. They have sent out wedding invitations. They will be holding the wedding of Shinto Miao and Gong Sun Xiaoye in a month. Even our sword-sex pagoda forest received an invitation. Chu Qingqi said. Oh, Shinto Miao is a disciple of the sealed saber royal palace. He actually sent an invitation to the sword-sex pagoda forest? Yi Guchen asked. To be able to have a marriage alliance with the Gongsun family, the Shinto family can't wait to show off. If they were to really board the Gongsun family's ship, then even the 7 major factions would not dare to belittle the Shinto family. Hearing this, Yi Guchen nodded in agreement. As a forging family, the Gongsun family's influence was not inferior to the 7 major forces. Of course, our sword-sex pagoda forest does not have the time to go. Brother Yi, do you want to go and watch the show? Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. He suddenly remembered that Xiao Wanru should be marrying Shinto Miao on the same day. However, Yi Guchen had already given her a chance to choose. In the end, Xiao Wanru chose to accept her fate. The jade slip was also thrown into the smelly ditch by Madame Xiao. Since that was the case, Yi Guchen naturally could not be bothered with this kind of thing. After all, they had only met by chance. Chapter 441. What's the other thing? Yi Guchen asked. Chu Qingqi said. Zither Fairy is here. She asked me to tell you to recuperate and not force yourself. Your health is the most important thing. Where is she? Yi Guchen asked. She's gone, Chu Qingqi said. Is that so? I see. Yi Guchen sighed. Zither Fairy's feelings were already known when he climbed the Thunder Tide in the Void Sword realm. But it was destined to have no ending. Yi Guchen was not a sentimental person. His relationship with Su Jianshi and Situ Hongxue could not be severed. It was impossible for him to make any promises to others. He and Zither Fairy were like a bird and a fish, gazing at each other across the sea. They could keep each other company as friends, but they could not be together forever. Brother Yi, recuperate well, Chu Qingqi said and left. Yi Guchen took out some healing elixirs again, and began to recuperate. At the same time, he began to practice the Great Void Sword wave in his mind. Yi Guchen, who possessed the heart integrated into sword, could form a virtual image of a sword in his mind. Although the Great Illusionary Sword Ripple was a top-grade king-level sword art, it was impossible to master it overnight. However, with the accumulation of many little drops, there would come a day when he would be able to comprehend it. This recuperation lasted for another 5 days. There was only half a month left before the bet. Many warriors in northern Liang City began to discuss in private again. That sword master has been recuperating for half a month and hasn't left the inn. As for the young war emperor, I heard that he has already killed the 3rd saint. It seems that sword master will definitely lose this bet. But it's also because of his injuries. That only means that Yi Guchen is overestimating himself and is a reckless man. He made such a bet with such an arrogant tone, but he doesn't have the ability to fulfill it. Some warriors who sided with the Limitless Sword sect and other forces spoke with disdain. But no matter what, most warriors in northern Liang City believed that Yi Guchen would probably lose. After recuperating for 15 days, Yi Guchen finally walked out of the inn. Not long after the end of the exchange, the 7 great forces also officially started a war with the barbarian tribe. A tug-of-war broke out in many cities of the Great Desolate Prefecture. I can finally make my move. Yi Guchen's internal injuries were almost completely healed. During this time, Yi Guchen also took advantage of the time to comprehend the Great Void Sword Wave. Yi Guchen shook his head. Supreme Grade King level swordsmanship is indeed difficult to comprehend. It took me 5 days to reach the beginner level. However, if his words were to spread, the group of Sword Dao Grandmasters would definitely be speechless. Even a divine-dwelling expert would not be able to reach the initial glimpse stage of a top-grade king-level sword technique in just 5 days. Yi Guchen actually thought it was too slow. At the initial glimpse stage, one could unleash 30% of the martial arts power. However, even though it was only 30%, Yi Guchen felt that it was almost as powerful as the ultimate move of the Void Sword technique, the 10,000 Void Wave. The power of a top-grade king-level sword technique was indeed far superior to that of a spirit-level sword technique. In addition, Yi Guchen was also concentrating on studying the final 6th move of the God-slaying sword technique. Yi Guchen vaguely guessed that the power of the 6th move would not be weaker than Wind Mark, the ultimate move of wind sweeping building. However, the comprehension of the 6th move also required an opportunity and could not be rushed. Now it's time to go out. Yi Guchen thought to himself. With wind sweeping building's influence, no matter how much the limitless sword sect and other forces hated him, they would not send experts to attack him. Under such circumstances, it would not benefit any of the forces if a civil war broke out. The news of Yi Guchen leaving the inn fell into the ears of some people. However, there was only half a month left before the bet. No one believed that Yi Guchen could still catch up with the young war emperor. Just as Yi Guchen was about to leave northern Liang City, a beautiful figure dressed in white blocked his path. LV Qinghan? Looking at the beautiful figure that was as cold as a fairy, Yi Guchen's eyes were as calm as an ancient well. Yi Guchen, you have exceeded my expectations. Not only do you have an unparalleled talent in swordsmanship, but you also have a top-notch talent in forging. LV Qinghan's beautiful eyes revealed a strange light as she stared at Yi Guchen. I presume you are not here to flatter me, right? Yi Guchen said indifferently. Qinghan has never met you before, so I could not imagine how outstanding you are. Now, it's no wonder that junior sister Qin is so infatuated with you. However, does she exist in your heart? LV Qinghan asked. She is a very good friend. Yi Guchen said truthfully. Is that all? LV Qinghan frowned slightly. That's all, Yi Guchen said. Then have you ever thought about junior sister Qin's feelings? Since you have no intention of accepting her, why are you giving her hope? LV Qinghan frowned. Do you mean that we can't even be friends? Yi Guchen said. If you don't mean it, you will only hurt junior sister Qin. Why don't you let go and break off the relationship? Let her find her own happiness and forget about each other. Isn't it better than being entangled with each other? LV Qinghan said casually. She was so calm and casual as if it was a matter of course. Yi Guchen's eyes turned slightly cold. What does this have to do with you? What right do you have to interfere? He understood the meaning behind LV Qinghan's words. It was very simple. Break off the relationship and stay away from Zither Fairy. However, Yi Guchen could not accept Zither Fairy's feelings. But what did this have to do with LV Qinghan? I am Zither Fairy's senior sister, and I was also instructed by the palace master to take good care of her. I can't bear to see her so sad day and night. You have now become an inner demon to Zither Fairy. LV Qinghan said matter-of-factly. Aren't you thinking too much? Did Zither Fairy ever need you to help her? Yi Guchen said coldly. I am doing this for her own good. Junior sister Qin will naturally be grateful to me in the future. And now there are better people to choose from. Since you won't choose junior sister Qin, why don't you let go? LV Qinghan shook her head slightly. Who? Yi Guchen asked. Little Spirit Emperor Zhou Tong. Whether it is character, temperament, appearance, or strength, he is excellent. And he is also in love with junior sister Qin. His appearance is the same. LV Qinghan said lightly. Does this mean that Yi Guchen is not what he appears to be? Is he a hypocrite? Yi Guchen suddenly understood. He finally understood why Zhou Tong would secretly target him at the exchange. So it was because of this. But it was even more impossible for Yi Guqin to give up. Yi Guqin was not too clear about Zhou Tong's character, but just based on his scheming and shrewdness, he was definitely not a gentleman who was the same as his appearance. It seemed that LV Qinghan was also deceived by Zhou Tong. Let me warn you, you can't judge a person based on their appearance. Be careful that you don't meet a good person, Yi Guqin reminded kindly. Zhou Tong always gave him the feeling that he was a smiling tiger. If he was deceived by him, he would definitely regret it in the future. Yi Guqin, although Qinghan respects you as a sword master, if you casually slander others like this, Qinghan's character will inevitably make Qinghan somewhat disappointed. LV Qinghan sighed. She was indeed somewhat disappointed. The sword master who had swept away all four sides at the exchange was actually so narrow-minded, casually suspecting others. This made LV Qinghan even more determined to make Zither Fairy give up on Yi Guqin. Seeing LV Qinghan's expression, Yi Guqin knew that he could not persuade her. Oftentimes, the more intelligent a woman was, the more foolish she would become under certain circumstances. There is no need for you to worry about the matters between Zither Fairy and I, and there is also no need for you to meddle in other people's business. Yi Guqin did not want to waste any more time. He glanced indifferently at LV Qinghan, then left directly. LV Qinghan did not stop him. She shook her head and sighed, muttering to herself, who would have thought that the sword master only had talent and strength, but his character would be like this. Zhou Tong is really much better than him. I really don't know what junior sister Qin is thinking. LV Qinghan knew that she was doing this for Zither Fairy's sake. But did Zither Fairy need her to do this? Chapter 442. After leaving LV Qinghan, Yi Guqin went on the road alone. He did not go with the other disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Because he had the Blood Barbarian tribe's kill talisman in his body, he had to face the cruel and violent holy sons and saintesses of the Blood Barbarian tribe. Moreover, this was a battle between Yi Guqin and the young war emperor. They could only rely on their own strength, and could not rely on external forces. But Yi Guqin was confident that he could defeat the holy sons and saintesses of the Blood Barbarian tribe. As for the Blood Barbarian tribe experts above the life and death realm, they would not easily make a move. Just like the experts of the 7 major forces, they would not deliberately kill the holy sons or totem warriors of the barbarian tribe. Soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals. This had always been the tacit agreement of the 7 major forces and the barbarian tribe. After Yi Guqin left northern Liang City, in a remote tavern in northern Liang City, it was a handsome young man who was dead drunk and looked dispirited. It was Bai Zichen. Unknowingly, a white-robed figure with an elegant temperament stood in front of him, waving a folding fan. Bai Zichen raised his head slightly. "Tsk, I didn't expect that the former second in the inner yard, second only to Yan Wushuang, would be in such dire straits." The white-robed figure was none other than Zhou Tong. "Are you here to laugh at me?" Bai Zichen shook his head and ignored him, continuing to drink. "Are you willing to be defeated by Yi Guqin like this?" Zhou Tong said indifferently. "Oh, if it were you, would you be able to defeat him?" Bai Zichen now recognized his own strength. It was impossible for him to defeat Yi Guqin. Sigh. Only knowing how to use force is the behavior of a boorish man. And what you really want is not to defeat Yi Guqin, but to kill him, isn't that right? Zhou Tong's tone was secretive as he looked deeply at Bai Zichen. Bai Zichen's drunken state immediately sobered up. Although in his heart, he really wanted Yi Guqin dead. However, he could not show it on the surface. After all, he was still a disciple of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. If he wanted to kill Yi Guqin, the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest would expel him. They might even punish him directly. "What grudge do you have with Yi Guqin?" Bai Zichen did not answer the question directly. Instead, he asked a question of his own. "Haha, you don't have to be so cautious. Since we have the same goal, we can cooperate. I can promise you that as long as we join forces, Yi Guqin will definitely die." Zhou Tong's tone was extremely calm, as if victory was already in his grasp. "What do you want me to do?" Bai Zichen did not waste any more time. as the hatred he had for Yi Guqin in his heart had reached a monstrous level that could not be soothed or washed away. Yi Guqin has just left northern Liang City. I'm very curious as to how he will honor his bet, Zhou Tong said. Those who are good at scheming will never underestimate their enemies. Zhou Tong was the same. He felt that Yi Guqin definitely had more than a 50% chance of winning. That was why he dared to make such a bet. Of course, it was unrealistic to want to kill Yi Guqin now. After all, the exchange had just ended and Feng Manlu had just issued a warning. If Yi Guqin died now, Feng Manlu would definitely not let the matter rest. Zhou Tong wanted Yi Guqin to die, but he could not implicate himself. Right now he only wanted to know more about Yi Guqin's trump cards. When the time came he would set up a killing move. Sure, I will follow him, Bai Zichen said. Zhou Tong nodded slightly and took out a human skin mask from his origin ring, as well as a set of ordinary linen clothes. Bai Zichen's heart tightened when he saw this. It seemed that Zhou Tong had already expected that he would be convinced. Thinking of this, Bai Zichen could not help but feel a sense of anticipation. With such a scheming opponent like Zhou Tong, it would be difficult for Yi Guqin to survive. Yi Guqin did not know that Zhou Tong had already begun to secretly plot against him. At this moment, he had already left northern Liang City, and had completely entered the battlefield between the barbarian race and the 7 great forces. Now, whether it was the 7 great forces or the barbarian race, the high-level experts were still biding their time. Most of them were saints, saintesses, and top heaven's prides. After 2 days, Yi Guqin was already very far away from northern Liang City. Almost at the same time, the saints and saintesses of the blood barbarian race also moved. Haha, the prey has finally come out. Xuechan, the saintess of the blood barbarian race, stuck out the tip of her scarlet tongue and licked her fiery red lips. These saints and saintesses had long received a message from the priests of their race. With a secret technique, they could sense Yi Guqin's position and movements at any time. Previously, Yi Guqin had been in northern Liang City, so they could not kill him at all. Now that Yi Guqin had come out, these saints and saintesses of the blood barbarian race naturally would not let him go. Sigh, poor man. But now, I have another thing to do. Xuechan smiled charmingly, then turned her head and asked, have you found the whereabouts of the saintess of the water tribe? Saintess, the saintess of the water tribe should be heading towards northern Liang City. A totem warrior of the blood barbarian race beside her replied. Oh, she wants to escape into the territory of the 7 great forces? How naive. With her identity as a barbarian, those people will not let her go. But for the promise of Kuei Shui Inji, I must kill her with my own hands and not let the others have the upper hand. Xuechan muttered to herself. Kuei Shui Inji was the other saintess of the water tribe. Like the wood tribe, the water tribe was originally peaceful. But recently, there seemed to be a big change in the water tribe. With the appearance of Saintess Kuei Shui Inji, the entire water tribe began to stir. Of course, Xuechan did not care about this. She only cared about the promise of Kuei Shui Inji. Whoever killed the saintess of the water tribe would get 3 divine items of the water attribute. The divine items of the water attribute were also very attractive to the blood barbarian race saints and saintesses. The direction of the saintess of the water tribe is the same as the prey. I can catch them all in one fell swoop. Xuechan thought to herself and set off. At the same time, the other blood barbarian race saints and saintesses, including the strongest saint of the blood barbarian race, Shui Wuchang, were also preparing to set off. For a moment, a storm was brewing. At this time, Yi Guqin had been traveling alone for 3 days. In addition to the previous 15 days, it had been 18 days. There were only 12 days left before the 1-month agreement. Blood barbarian race, why haven't you shown up yet? Yi Guqin sighed. A city appeared in his field of vision. There were more than 100 cities in the Great Wilderness Mansion, and 1/3 of them had been occupied by the barbarian race. The city in front of him had not been touched by the barbarian race. Yi Guqin pondered for a moment and entered the city. This city was called Blackrock City, and it was heavily guarded. However, there were no experts in the life and death realm. After all, this was only a small city, and it was not luxurious enough for a life and death realm expert to guard it. There were very few people in Black Rock City. Other than the soldiers in armor, there were very few ordinary people. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion in front of him. Have you heard? Someone caught a barbarian race spy. It's a woman, and she will be beheaded on the execution platform soon. Some people whispered to each other and hurriedly walked in a certain direction. A barbarian race spy? Yi Guchen thought to himself and followed them. Not long after, Yi Guchen arrived at the execution platform. There was already a circle of people and a row of soldiers around it. On the viewing platform of the execution platform, a pot-bellied sergeant was eating grapes as he looked coldly at the woman who was tied to the execution platform. It was a woman with an extremely beautiful face. She was as gentle as water, and her skin was especially clear and sparkling like water. Nothing could be more beautiful than this. The only thing that made her different from ordinary people was that her hair was aqua blue in color, and on her forehead, there were two translucent jade horns that looked like deer antlers. At the same time, Yi Guchen could feel the water-type totem power hidden in her body. However, this woman seemed to be seriously injured, which was why she did not have the slightest strength to resist. However, at this moment, 3 figures rushed to the execution platform. 2 of them were a shabbily dressed middle-aged couple, and the other was a cute little girl. Please don't kill my sister. She's a good person. She saved us from the barbarian race. The little girl begged. Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows. It seemed that things were not as simple as they seemed. Chapter 443. Outside the execution platform, the family of 3 knelt on the ground and kept begging. Please let the young lady go. She did save our family. The middle-aged couple also knelt on the ground and begged. Are you all blind? Can't you see that she is from the barbarian tribe? Now that the barbarian tribe is invading, any barbarian tribe member is our mortal enemy. Since I, Wu Fuguei, have caught this spy, of course I have to kill her. The sergeant named Wu Fuguei said righteously. He spoke righteously on the surface, but he was very happy in his heart. After catching the barbarian tribe spy and beheading her, he could ask for credit from the city lord. If he was lucky, he might even be promoted and get rich. Wu Fuguei didn't care whether the barbarian tribe woman was innocent or not. It had nothing to do with him. What a pity. That barbarian tribe woman is so beautiful, but I have to kill her before I can enjoy her. Wu Fuguei sighed in his heart. That woman was different from ordinary barbarian tribe women. She was as gentle as water, and made people's hearts itch. However, she was caught in public. Although Wu Fuguei had his own thoughts, he couldn't do anything to her. He could only drag her to the execution platform. Sir, you have to distinguish right from wrong. The young lady really saved our family of 3. The 3 people continued to plead. They also wanted to repay the kindness. Looking at the surrounding crowd, there seemed to be a faint commotion. Wu Fuguei's face darkened. He waved his hand and said, Guards, the 3 of them have violated the rules of the execution platform. Drive them out. Immediately, a group of sergeants rushed up and drove the family of 3 away. However, the little girl shrank her body and squeezed through the gap between the sergeants. She ran toward the blue-haired woman who was tied to the execution platform. Sister, I'm here to save you. The little girl's eyes were full of persistence. No, leave quickly. At this time, the blue-haired barbarian tribe woman suddenly said. Her voice was as gentle as water, but at this moment, it was filled with anxiety. Humph, you don't know how to appreciate kindness. On the platform, Wu Fuguei's face darkened. He struck out with his palm, and a handprint imbued with vigorous true qi violently swept towards the little girl. Wu Fuguei was also an expert in the 7th transformation of divine soul. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to become a sergeant. Everyone present cried out in alarm when they saw this. With this palm strike, even if the little girl didn't die, she would be seriously injured. The barbarian woman's expression changed. The expressions of the couple changed abruptly. Some people couldn't bear it, and turned their heads away. They didn't want to see that cruel scene. At this moment, An afterimage suddenly flashed by and carried the little girl away in an instant. The true chi palm print smashed into the ground with a loud bang, causing smoke and dust to fly everywhere. Who is it? Wu Fugui's face suddenly darkened. With him, an expert in the 7th transformation of Divine Soul. Overseeing the execution ground, there was actually someone who dared to make a move. The little girl's body was still trembling slightly. She slowly opened her closed eyes and saw the black-robed youth with an indifferent expression. "Thank you, big brother, for saving me," the little girl said gratefully. Yi Guchen nodded slightly and turned to look at the barbarian woman. The barbarian woman's gaze immediately fell on Yi Guchen. With just one look, the barbarian woman felt a sense of danger. This young man is definitely an expert, the barbarian woman thought to herself. Not to mention that she was seriously injured. Even if she was in her best condition, she knew that it would be difficult for her to deal with this young man in front of her. This young man looked so young, but he was so powerful. Could it be? The barbarian woman had a guess in her heart. However, she couldn't protect herself at this moment, so she couldn't guess Yi Guchen's attitude. When Wu Fugui saw that someone had appeared and disturbed the order of the execution ground, he immediately stood up and said with a stern expression, "Who are you?" Black Rock City was a small city, and it was also very far from northern Liang City. Therefore, the news about Yi Guchen had not reached here. However, even if Wu Fugui had heard the news, he had never seen Yi Guchen. It was impossible for him to know that the indifferent young man in front of him was the famous sword master. Taking someone's life without distinguishing between right and wrong is not justifiable even for a barbarian, right? Yi Guchen said indifferently. He didn't make a move because he had nothing better to do. Instead, he thought that he could find out about the barbarian tribe from this barbarian woman. Therefore, he naturally wanted to protect this barbarian woman for the time being. The woman's clear blue eyes revealed a trace of surprise when she heard this. This unfamiliar young man actually wanted to save her. How dare you? This person wants to protect the barbarian tribe. He must be in cahoots with the barbarian tribe. He is a spy. Men capture him and behead him together. Wu Fugui shouted loudly. Some of the soldiers in the surroundings surrounded Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen's eyes darkened slightly. After thinking for a while, he took out a token. It was the purple gold token from the Sword Master's Pagoda Forest. If someone was slightly more knowledgeable, they would definitely recognize that this token came from the Sword Master's Pagoda Forest, one of the 7 superpowers. The barbarian woman recognized the token the moment Yi Guchen took it out. Her eyes narrowed slightly. No wonder, the barbarian woman thought to herself. Then she felt relieved. Only in the 7 superpowers would there be such a young expert. As a barbarian woman, she had naturally seen this token before. However, Wu Fugui did not seem to have such knowledge. When he saw Yi Guchen take out the token, he sneered and said, "Now you know to be afraid. What's the use of taking out a lousy token? Do you think it can intimidate me?" Wu Fugui's face was arrogant as he waved his hand. The surrounding soldiers straightened up and charged forward. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly and did not say anything else. He did not even take out the Xianming heavy sword. He only flicked his fingers and used the 6th meridian divine sword. Streaks of sword chi shot out from his fingertips and bombarded the soldiers. Of course, Yi Guchen held back. He only sent the soldiers flying and did not seriously injure them. Looking at the soldier who was beaten to a pulp in the blink of an eye, regardless of whether it was Wu Fugui or the surrounding crowd who were watching the show, all of their faces revealed astonishment. Wu Fugui asked himself, if it were him, an expert in the 7th transformation of godly soul, it would be impossible for him to deal with so many soldiers alone. However, Yi Guchen did not even move. With a few flicks of his fingers, he wiped out all the soldiers. Someone, go to the governor's mansion and ask for help." Wu Fugui's eyes were filled with panic. The strength that Yi Guchen displayed had deeply shocked him. For a moment, he did not even dare to move and could only shout. Immediately, there were soldiers who ran to the governor's mansion. Yi Guchen was not in a hurry. He just stood there calmly with his hands behind his back. Big brother is so powerful. The little girl blinked her big eyes. and revealed a look of admiration. Who told you to be arrogant? The governor is an expert in the 9th transformation of godly soul, and there is the black armored army. You can't escape today. Wu Fugui thought coldly. After a while, the sound of horse hooves could be heard from afar. A group of black armored cavalry rushed over. The leader was a dignified middle-aged man. It was the governor of Black Rock City. Governor, you are finally here. This person is extremely arrogant and wanted to kidnap the barbarian girl. He must be a spy from the barbarian tribe. I beg you to punish this spy. When the governor of Black Rock City arrived, Wu Fugui immediately ran up and said righteously, "Oh, is that so?" The governor of Black Rock City frowned. If that was the case, then he must take down the young man in front of him. In the face of the governor of Black Rock City, Yi Guchen's expression was calm. He took out the purple gold token and said casually, "I only need an explanation." When he saw the purple gold token, the governor of Black Rock City's pupils suddenly shrank. His eyes were filled with shock and awe. Wu Fugui was ignorant and could not recognize the token. However, as a governor of a city, the governor of Black Rock City naturally knew the meaning of the token. "Governor, please punish this traitor severely. Take him down and behead him in public." Wu Fugui was still unaware of his situation. His face was filled with righteousness. "You scoundrel!" The governor of Black Rock City slapped Wu Fugui across the face and sent him flying dozens of feet away. Blood and teeth flew out of his mouth at the same time. The entire execution ground was dead silent. Chapter 444. Everyone present, regardless of whether they were spectators or soldiers, was stunned. In the entire Black Rock City, besides the Black Rock City governor, the person with the highest status was Wu Fugui. Furthermore, Wu Fugui was usually trusted by the Black Rock City governor. However, at this moment, the Black Rock City governor had indeed made a move. However, his target was not Yi Guchen but Wu Fugui. City governor, what's wrong with you? The traitor is right there. Wu Fugui still did not understand. He covered his face with one hand and pointed at Yi Guchen with the other. His face was filled with confusion. "You bastard! How dare you say that the prodigies of the 7 superpowers are spies of the barbarian tribe?" When the Black Rock City governor saw this, he wanted to skin Wu Fugui alive. He was only a small city governor. However, he recognized the purple gold token that the young man had taken out. Even in the Sword Sect Tower, only the top prodigies of the inner yard could possess such a token. In addition, the Black Rock City governor had vaguely heard some news over the past few days, and roughly knew what had happened in northern Liang City. The young man in front of him, regardless of his appearance or temperament, matched the brilliant prodigy perfectly. There was no doubt about the young man's identity. However, the Black Rock City governor immediately stepped forward and cupped his hands slightly towards Yi Guchen. "I am the Black Rock City governor. It is my honor to be able to meet the Sword Sect Tower's Sword Sect Tower, Lord Yi Guchen." The Black Rock City governor's words caused everyone present to be completely dumbfounded. Sword Sect? Yi Guchen? Wu Fugui's brain buzzed as if thousands of thunderbolts had struck him. His entire body froze on the spot, as if he had lost his soul. His face instantly turned pale. Although he did not know what had happened in northern Liang City, he knew about the Sword Sect Tower and Yi Guchen. That young man is the rumored dead Yi Guchen? Wu Fugui's body trembled like a sieve. The Black Rock City governor's words made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. What? That young man is Yi Guchen? Wasn't the Sword Sect rumored to be dead? How could that be? Your news is outdated. I heard a few days ago that Yi Guchen's sword prowess was unrivaled during the exchange. He swept away all the geniuses of his generation. A commotion broke out around the execution ground. When Wu Fugui heard this, his face turned ashen. When the female berserker who was bound to the execution platform heard the discussions around her, a surprised look appeared on her delicate face. Yi Guchen had a certain reputation even among the barbarian tribe. After all, many holy sons and holy daughters of the barbarian tribe would also pay attention to the geniuses of the 7 forces. Previously, a sacred child from the Berserker tribe had said that the death of Yi Guqin from the sword sect meant that they had one less great enemy. But now, not only was Yi Guqin not dead, he seemed to have become even stronger. This was not good news for the barbarian holy sons and saintesses. However, when she thought about her current situation, she couldn't help but reveal a self-deprecating smile. He couldn't even protect himself, so why would he care about such things? Black Rock City Governor, I want to take this person away. Do you have any objections? Yi Guqin pointed at the female Berserker tribe and asked. No objections, of course I have no objections. The Black Rock City Governor nodded repeatedly and continued. And this Wu Fuguei, since he dared to offend you, I will strip him of his position as sergeant and throw him into prison. When Wu Fuguei heard this, his face turned pale and his lips trembled. Not only was his dream of being promoted and getting rich shattered, but he also ended up in such a miserable state. It was all because he didn't recognize the identity of the young man in front of him. Yi Guqin nodded indifferently. He didn't care about Wu Fuguei at all. Then, Yi Guqin took the female Berserker tribe away. The family of three also thanked Yi Guqin profusely. In a secluded courtyard in Black Rock City, Yi Guqin sized up the female Berserker tribe. The closer he looked at her, the more he felt that she had a temperament that was as gentle as water. With her long blue hair and snow-white skin, she looked as beautiful as an ice sculpture. The two jade-like horns on her forehead didn't ruin her temperament. Instead, it made her even more mysterious. Feeling Yi Guqin's gaze, the female Berserker tribe felt a little uneasy. Yi Guqin waved his hand and took out a few supreme-grade healing elixirs. The female Berserker tribe accepted the elixirs and swallowed them without hesitation. I need to know everything you know. Yi Guqin didn't beat around the bush and said directly. The female Berserker tribe was stunned. However, she knew that she couldn't refute and sighed. I am the Dragon Lady of the Water Tribe. So you are the Holy Lady of the Water Tribe? Yi Guqin thought to himself. Then, the Dragon Lady told Yi Guqin about the situation. The Water Tribe was originally a peaceful tribe. However, with the appearance of the other Holy Lady, Kuei-shui Inji, the entire Water Tribe was in turmoil and even split up. At the same time, Kuei-shui Inji seized the opportunity when the Dragon Lady came out to secretly surround and kill her. Some of the servants of the Dragon Lady were killed. Only the Dragon Lady barely escaped. Kuei-shui Inji was also the Holy Lady of the Water Tribe. Naturally, she couldn't do it herself, so she contacted the Blood Barbarians. The Dragon Lady was besieged by the Blood Barbarians. She had no choice but to escape to Bailiang City, which was within the territory of the Seven Forces. You have the Blood Barbarians' kill talisman in your body? Yi Guqin asked. The Dragon Lady nodded slightly. If not, she wouldn't have been chased by the Blood Barbarians. I think those barbarians will catch up soon, Yi Guqin said. Aren't you afraid? Let's leave, the Dragon Lady said. The kill talisman in her body only needed to last for a month. After a month, when the crisis was over, the Dragon Lady could quietly return to the Water Tribe and compete with Kuei-shui Inji again. Leave? Why should we leave? Let's stay here and wait for them to come. The 1-month deadline was approaching. Now that the Dragon Lady was here, she would attract more holy sons and holy ladies. How could Yi Guqin let go of such an opportunity? I've heard some news about you, but the holy sons and holy ladies of the Blood Barbarians are very powerful, the Dragon Lady said solemnly. What's there to be afraid of? Yi Guqin said casually. The Dragon Lady sighed in her heart. She thought that Yi Guqin was a bit arrogant. Yi Guqin might not be able to deal with Shui Wuchang, not to mention the other holy sons and holy ladies of the Blood Barbarians. Of course, that was just the Dragon Lady's thought. She never knew Yi Guqin's true strength. To thank you for saving me, I'll give this to you. The Dragon Lady hesitated for a moment, and then took out a jade pendant. The jade pendant was crystal clear like water. There seemed to be flowing chalcedony in the jade. This is... Yi Guqin was surprised. He felt the water snake totem in the 5-color golden core in his body tremble. This is black water jade, a water divine item of the Water Tribe. Although it's not the most precious divine item, it's still very rare. The dragon lady handed the jade to Yi Guchen. Since Yi Guchen had saved her life, she couldn't not repay him. Yi Guchen didn't refuse and took the Blackwater jade. Both were divine items of the 5 elements, but the quality of the Blackwater jade was lower than the greenwood heart of the young war emperor. But since it was a divine item, it naturally had its uses. Yi Guchen went straight into the house, trying to figure out the effects of the 5 elements divine items on the 5-colored golden elixir. Chapter 445. Yi Guchen sat cross-legged in his room. He held the black aqua jade in his hand and activated the 5-colored golden core in his dantian. Among the 5-colored golden core, the fire vermilion bird totem was the most powerful, followed by the wood azure dragon totem, the metal white tiger totem, the water soaring snake totem, and the earth black tortoise totem had no power at all. Now, Yi Guchen planned to guide the water mystical power in the black aqua jade to the soaring snake totem. As time passed, Yi Guchen felt that the pure water mystical power in the black aqua jade was gradually gathering in his dantian and 5-colored golden core along his meridians. Then it was all absorbed by the soaring snake totem. The soaring snake totem was of the water attribute, and its power attribute was compatible with the black aqua jade. In an instant, Yi Guchen felt a water totem power flowing in his body. He felt as if he was in the water, and he felt as if he was as good as water. It even seemed to touch Yi Guchen's heartstrings, and he had a vague understanding of the water sword principle. The 5 elemental sacred items have such an effect. Yi Guchen was surprised. He had thought that the 5 elemental sacred items could at most provide a boost in strength, but he did not expect it to have such an effect on the intent realm. If he could get a few more sacred items, or higher quality sacred items, wouldn't he be able to comprehend the sword essence directly? If that was the case, then comprehending the 5 elemental sword essence and combining them would not be an extravagant hope. Yi Guchen was more determined to get the young war emperor's verdant wood heart. In the following time, Yi Guchen kept absorbing the energy in the black aqua jade. Dragoness, on the other hand, was surprised by this unexpected development. This was because she could feel that the supreme totem in her body was being suppressed. And the source of the suppression came from the room where Yi Guchen was cultivating. How is it possible that my supreme totem is being suppressed? Dragon Lady's blue eyes were filled with surprise. Her totem was the supreme totem of the water tribe, the serene water blue serpent. This was also because she was born with a special physique and had a trace of the water dragon's bloodline, which allowed her to awaken such a powerful totem. This was why she was called the Dragon Lady. However, her blue serene serpent totem had never been suppressed, let alone in the water tribe, even when she was competing with the holy sons and holy daughters of the other barbarian tribes. But now it was being suppressed by Yi Guchen's aura. Impossible. Could it be that Yi Guchen also has a totem? No way. It is impossible for an outsider to have a supreme totem. Or is she practicing some secret technique? Dragon Lady was extremely confused. Among the information she had received, Yi Guchen was a sword cultivator, but at this moment, he released an aura and power that could suppress her blue serene serpent totem. Moreover, as time passed, that power became more and more intense. In the end, in the dragon girl's body, the serene blue flood dragon totem couldn't help but manifest on its own. On the surface of Dragoness's body, an illusory blue water serpent appeared. That was a technique that all totem awakened. Totem spirit manifestation. What is going on? Dragon Lady was completely confused. The serene blue flood dragon hissed, with a kind of reverence and a kind of desire. What is Yi Guchen doing? Why does he make the serene blue flood dragon have a kind of desire? Dragon Lady was at a loss, but she didn't dare to enter the residence rashly. I should wait for him to come out before asking, Dragon Lady thought. She had the bloodline of the water dragon. At the same time, her serene blue flood dragon also had the rare ability to transform and evolve. But the transformation of the serene blue flood dragon had been stuck at a bottleneck. If this was an opportunity, Dragon Lady vaguely felt that Yi Guchen seemed to be bringing about a great change to her. At the same time, 100 miles away from Blackrock City, a group of barbarian tribe troops, more than 500 of them, were all totem warriors in the Divine Soul Realm. They were like a bloody flood, marching towards Black Rock City. Haha, this time I am in the lead. Both Shui Wuchang and Shui Cicada are behind me. Dragon Lady and the one who killed Shui Ling are my prey. At the front of the army, there was a muscular man in blood-red armor with a bloodthirsty smile on his face. He was also a holy son of the Blood Barbarian tribe. His name was Shui Zhan. Although he was not as strong as Shui Wuchang, he was stronger than Holy Son Shui Ling. I thought Dragon Lady would run away, but I didn't expect her to be with the one who killed Shui Ling. She even stayed there, waiting for me to kill her. Shui Zhan felt that he had found a great advantage. If he was in his best condition, he would not dare to attack Dragon Lady. But Shui Zhan knew that Dragon Lady was seriously injured and could not fight at all. Just as Shui Zhan and the others were rushing towards Black Rock City, the governor of Black Rock City naturally received the news. He had sent out many scouts before, and now he received the news that the Blood Barbarian tribe troops were attacking. What should we do? The governor of Black Rock City looked worried. Their small city would not be guarded by a big shot. Although the governor of Black Rock City was an expert in the 9th transformation of the Divine Soul Realm, he knew that he would die if he faced any holy son of the barbarian tribe. Sir, you forgot that the Sword Grandmaster is still in the city, an aide said. Yes, how could I forget that? But will he help us for free? In the eyes of the governor of Black Rock City, the geniuses of the 7 forces stood at the top. Would they care about the lives of these people? We can only rely on him now. The aide sighed. Then someone went to Yi Guchen's residence to inform him. Yi Guchen was still cultivating, but Dragon Lady was outside. Before Yi Guchen started cultivating, he said that if the barbarian tribe came, there was no need to be afraid, Dragon Lady replied. The messenger nodded slightly and left. Dragon Lady sighed when she saw this. As expected, the Blood Barbarian tribe had chased after them. Dragon Lady had thought of leaving directly. But first of all, she did not know what Yi Guchen's attitude towards her was. Second of all, Dragon Lady wanted to know what the aura that Yi Guchen released to suppress the Serene Blue Dragon was. Therefore, Dragon Lady did not choose to leave. After that, the messenger told the governor of Black Rock City about the situation. The governor of Black Rock City was half happy and half worried. He was happy that Yi Guchen had agreed to help, but worried that Yi Guchen could defeat the holy son of the Blood Barbarian tribe. Before they really fought, the governor of Black Rock City could not be sure. After about an hour, the 500 totem warriors led by Bloody War had arrived outside the Black Rock City. At this moment, Black Rock City was in a state of panic. In the entire Black Rock City, there were only a little over 1,000 soldiers. But the barbarian tribe's totem warriors were famous for their ferocity. One totem warrior was enough to deal with 3 ordinary soldiers. Therefore, Black Rock City did not have an advantage. Blood Barbarian tribe, we have minded our own business. Do you really have to attack? The governor of Black Rock City stood on the city wall and said loudly, "How boring. Brothers, slaughter the city." Bloody Battle had no intention of negotiating. He chose to attack directly. The Blood Barbarian tribe was cruel and violent. There was no room for negotiation. Moreover, Bloody Battle had a more important goal. He directly used his supreme totem, the demonic blood python. With one attack he broke the city gate. Instantly, a great battle broke out. Blades collided and blood flowed. Yi Guchen finally finished absorbing the power of the mystic water jade, and opened his eyes. Chapter 446. In Yi Guchen's eyes, there seemed to be dark flowing water flowing in them. In the surrounding space, there was a faint water vapor. He looked at the black aqua jade in his hand. It was originally crystal clear and full of spirituality, but now it was grayish-white. Obviously, the power had been absorbed by Yi Guchen. In his dantian, on the 5-colored golden core, the dark soaring serpent totem was faintly glowing with cold light. Different from the green dragon and vermilion bird totem, the soaring serpent totem had the cold water element. It's a pity that a piece of mysterious water jade, can only activate the soaring serpent totem. I can't display its mysteries for the time being. However, I have some understanding of the water concept. Yi Guchen thought in his heart. If this understanding was deeper, and with the totem completely awakened, it would not be difficult to understand the sword essence. After thinking about it, Yi Guchen pushed open the door and walked out. Outside, the dragon lady was sitting on the ground. After swallowing the healing elixir, the dragon lady's injuries had recovered a little. Although she had not fully recovered, she could still protect herself. At this moment, seeing Yi Guchen come out, her beautiful blue eyes released a strange light as she stared at Yi Guchen. "What's wrong?" Yi Guchen asked. "What are you cultivating? That kind of aura can suppress my supreme totem?" The dragon lady could not hold back her curiosity. Moreover, she could vaguely feel that Yi Guchen's secret would be helpful to her blue serene serpent's transformation. "Do I need to tell you?" Yi Guchen's face was calm. He saved the dragon lady, but it did not mean that he had to be honest with her. Moreover, this was Yi Guchen's own secret. How could he casually reveal it? Yi Guchen could not trust the dragon lady now. If the barbarian tribe knew that Yi Guchen had 5 ancestral totems, then Yi Guchen would definitely be hunted down endlessly. The dragon lady seemed to feel that her words were a little abrupt. She could not help but say apologetically, "Sorry, I was rude." Yi Guchen nodded slightly. However, he also understood that the soaring snake totem, as a water progenitor totem, could suppress the power of a supreme totem. It seemed that Yi Guchen would gain a great advantage in dealing with the barbarian race in the future. But now, Yi Guchen looked into the distance. Black smoke billowed, and the sound of weapons clashing could be heard. "You stay here," Yi Guchen said casually. Then he left in a flash. The barbarian totem warriors and the city guards were fighting in a chaotic battle near the city gate. The Black Rock City governor was also among them. With his 9 transformations of the godly soul, he was still able to hold his own. However, this was under the condition that the saints were not participating in the battle. "You must be the Black Rock City Lord." "That's fine too. I'll kill you first before looking for those two." Shuezhan held a serpent prism halberd in his hand. His body was covered in blood armor, and he was extremely burly. He swept across the surroundings and charged directly at the Black Rock City governor. Boom. As expected, the Black Rock City governor was sent flying and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Governor." The eyes of the surrounding soldiers turned red. The invincible governor in their hearts had been defeated by the barbarian saint in one move. "You can't even withstand a single blow." Shuezhan stood up and charged forward, wanting to end the Black Rock City governor's life with one blow. At this moment, a heavy sword shadow whizzed over from afar, accompanied by a sharp sound of wind breaking. "Who is it?" Shuezhan waved his serpent prism halberd in an attempt to block the sword shadow. However, the sword shadow was the Xianming heavy sword. In an instant, Shuezhan felt an extremely heavy force coming from the serpent prism halberd. It was as if Mount Tai was crashing down on him. With a puff, Shuezhan retreated dozens of steps and groaned in his chest. This time everyone around, including the blood barbarian totem warriors, was stunned. Shuezhan had just sent the Black Rock City governor flying with one blow. In the blink of an eye, he was sent flying. "Who is it?" Shuezhan's face was filled with shame and anger. He looked around coldly with his blood-red eyes. The Xianming heavy sword flew back and fell into Yi Guchen's hands. "Master Yi Guchen." The governor of Black Rock City, as well as the soldiers, were all excited. The Black Rock City governor, in particular, had been worried. He thought that although Yi Guchen was a genius, it would not be easy for him to defeat the barbarian saint. However, now, Yi Guchen had attacked and sent the blood barbarian saint flying with one blow. This level of strength had far exceeded his expectations. What Yi Guchen could it be? Shuezhan's face changed slightly. At the same time, his secret technique also told him. It was the young man in front of him who had killed Xue Ling. Damn it, the sword master is not dead. Shuezhan's face darkened slightly. Yi Guchen did not waste any time. He directly attacked. The Xianming heavy sword resonated with the void, erupting with an extremely terrifying shock wave. This shockwave even exceeded the limit of the shockwave produced by the Void Sword technique. It was the Great Void Sword Wave. Although it was only 30% of its power, the power of the Great Void Sword Wave was stronger than the Void Sword technique. The transparent sword ripples spread in all directions. What was strange was that the master of Black Rock City and the soldiers were not affected at all. Instead, it was the totem warriors who were sent flying in all directions as if they were swept away. The Saint Shuizhan was also under great pressure. He could only resist with all his might. Yi Guchen's strength was far beyond his expectations. Totem spirit manifestation. Shuizhan could not hold on any longer and directly used his last resort. A blood-red python scuttled out of his body with a monstrous blood-evil aura. However, Yi Guchen's eyes were still indifferent. Shuizhan was slightly stronger than Xueling, but only by a little. Yi Guchen did not intend to fight for a long time. He directly used the fifth move of the god-slaying sword technique, Yama. A blood-red Yama phantom soared into the sky. Then, in front of everyone's shocked eyes, the blood-red figure slashed out with a blood-red sword and directly beheaded the demonic blood python totem. Shuizhan's aura also plummeted. His face was pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. If their totems were damaged, they would also suffer a backlash. It's over. Yi Guchen stepped on Shuizhan's chest. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him. Shuizhan spat out a mouthful of blood, and almost all his bones were broken. Yi Guchen slowly walked to Shuizhan and took the saint token. This was the proof of counting merits. I only got the first token now. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly, as if he was not satisfied with his progress. At this moment, there was dead silence. The Black Rock City governor and the others' expressions were extremely interesting. They had thought that they would see a fierce battle, but in the end, the saint of the Blood Barbarian tribe was overpowered and did not have a chance to fight back. More importantly, Yi Guchen did not even use the strange fire and strange thunder to restrain the Blood Barbarian tribe. Yi Guchen turned and left without saying a word. The ground was littered with totem warriors and the barbarian saint's corpse. Is this the true strength of the sword sect? The Black Rock City governor was amazed. Yi Guchen returned to his remote courtyard. The dragon lady was still recuperating. Looking at Yi Guchen, who was clean and did not show any signs of fighting, the dragon lady asked in confusion, "Why are you back so soon? Didn't you fight? If more barbarians come, let me know." Yi Guchen did not say much and went straight into his residence. What happened? The dragon lady was puzzled. That was the saint of the Blood Barbarian tribe. Even if she was at her peak, she would have to go through a lot of trouble. However, she did not see any signs of fighting on Yi Guchen. It was as if he had just gone out for a walk. The dragon lady was puzzled and went out to ask around. When she learned that Yi Guchen had killed a saint in 3 moves, she was shocked. The dragon lady's beautiful face, which was like an ice sculpture, also showed an extremely interesting expression. Chapter 447. Yi Guchen was indeed famous in the barbarian race. However, that was all there was to it. Most of the holy sons and holy daughters of the barbarian race didn't believe in the rumors of how he could kill 100 people with a single sword strike. Even Dragoness had thought so before. After all, in the barbarian tribe, even the double champion and the triple champion were not as good as Yi Guchen. Most of the barbarian tribe geniuses thought that Yi Guchen's reputation was exaggerated. But now, after knowing that Yi Guchen had killed a holy son in 3 moves, the dragon lady was shocked beyond words. In addition, Yi Guchen's aura suppressed the blue serpent in his residence. This made Dragoness even more interested in Yi Guchen. In his residence, Yi Guchen was meditating with his eyes closed. At the same time, he was thinking about his future plans. He had to go to the barbarian race's 5 elemental land. There was only one reason before, and that was to enter the 5 elemental temple to find the sacred medicine to cure Su Jianshi. Now, with Yi Guchen's need for the 5 elemental sacred item, he had to enter the 5 elemental land. I have to find an opportunity to infiltrate the barbarian race. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered. Dragoness seemed to be a good breakthrough point. But now Yiguchen didn't fully trust Dragoness, so he had to postpone his plan for now. However, Yiguchen wouldn't delay for too long because he knew Su Jianshi couldn't wait. Another day passed, and another blood barbarian Holy Sun came to kill him. Their strength was on par with Shuezhan, but Yiguchen dealt with him easily. The Black Rock City Lord and the others were overjoyed. They were about to worship Yiguchen as a god. Dragoness, on the other hand, looked at him with a slightly strange expression. Yiguchen asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Dragoness said, "Why do I feel like you can compete with the Triple Crown champions of the barbarian race?" Yiguchen's eyes narrowed slightly. After some explanation from the Dragon Lady, Yiguchen had a general understanding of the situation of the barbarian race. Those who possessed 2 or even 3 supreme totems were known as the Double Crown King, or the Triple Crown King. His strength and status were comparable to the top geniuses of the 7 major forces. Dragon Lady's analogy was a form of admiration and recognition of Yiguchen's strength. "Then why didn't you say quadruple champion?" Yiguchen asked calmly. From the Dragoness, he learned that an unparalleled saint was born from the barbarian race. He had 4 supreme totems, and they were all of different attributes. He was called the King of the 4 Crowns. "You're strong indeed. You can even compete with the 3 Crown Kings. However, the 4 Crown Kings are impossible. He's not only extremely strong, but he also came from the 5 Elements Temple. He has an extraordinary status. Some people even say that he's going to become the 5 Crown Kings in the future," said Long Nu. Although she valued Yiguchen's strength, she didn't think that he could compete with the King of the 4 Crowns. Oh, Yiguchen was surprised. Came from the 5 Elements Temple? Yiguchen felt that he would definitely have conflicts with the King of the 4 Crowns in the future. However, Yiguchen had another question. The 5-colored golden core in his body had 5 ancestral totems. If that was the case, wouldn't he also be called the King of the 5 Crowns? Of course, Yiguchen wouldn't tell Long Nu about this, because this news couldn't be leaked now. If it was leaked, Yiguchen had no doubt that the barbarian race's mighty figures would seize the 5-colored golden core in his body. Temporarily suppressing his curiosity, Yiguchen didn't say anything more. 2 days later, Yiguchen killed another saint of the blood barbarian race. Now there were a total of 3 people. But this move shocked the blood barbarian race. In the Heaven Blood Demon Castle, the high priest of the blood barbarian race looked at the 3 cracked blood-colored jade tokens on the bloodstone platform with an extremely gloomy expression. The blood barbarian race was not a top force in the barbarian race. There were only 10 saints and saintesses in the race. Now, including Xueling, the blood barbarian race had lost 4 saints. Only 6 were left. Who is the person who killed the 4 saints of the blood barbarian race? The high priest's tone was gloomy. "High priest, do you want us to help?" An elder came forward from behind. "The person who killed the 4 saints must have an extraordinary identity. If you help and the news leaks out, the Heaven Blood Demon Castle will soon be besieged by the divine dwelling stage experts of the 7 forces." The high priest said coldly. "Soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals." This was the tacit understanding between the 7 forces and the barbarian race. If one side were to break through first, the situation would definitely take an unexpected turn. The blood barbarian race was not at its peak among the barbarian race, and couldn't bear such a change. "Then what should we do?" the elder asked worriedly. "Tell Shui Wuchang and the others not to act alone. Gather together and then attack. If they can't deal with this person together, then they are not worthy of being saints," the high priest said coldly. As the order was issued, Shui Wuchang, Shui Chan and the other saints of the blood barbarian race received the news. Is this person really so powerful? Or has the dragon girl recovered from her injuries? Shui Chan, who was heading toward Black Rock City, thought to herself. She didn't believe that the saints were all killed one-on-one. In addition, Yiguchen and the dragon girl were together, which made Shui Chan mistakenly think that the dragon girl might have recovered from her injuries and joined forces to kill the saints. But Shui Chan was still a little vigilant. She decided to meet up with the strongest saint in the race, Shui Wuchang. In addition to the 2 of them, there were 4 other saints of the blood barbarian race. 3 of them also chose to wait for Shui Wuchang's arrival. Only the Blood Sky Saint was still arrogant and conceited. He felt that he could deal with Yi Guqin alone. Therefore, he didn't wait for others and came directly to Black Rock City. Yi Guqin attacked and fought with him. But it had to be said that the Blood Sky Saint was stronger than the previous saints. Yi Guqin had to use the Heavenly Sun Xianming fire to completely restrain the Blood Sky Saint, and then kill him. But just as he was killing the Blood Sky Saint, Yi Guqin suddenly felt that there seemed to be someone lurking in the dark, watching him. Who is it? Yi Guqin's spiritual power swept out. His spiritual power was far stronger than ordinary experts of the same level, so his perception was naturally more sensitive. Not far away, a plain figure suddenly flew out. Yi Guqin swept out his sword, and the blood-red blade tore through the air. Seeing this, the figure sped up and was about to leave, but his thigh was grazed, and blood spurted out. Just as Yi Guqin was about to chase after him, the figure threw a disposable hidden weapon with a backhand. Accompanied by bursting flames, countless silver needles that were dipped in poison stabbed toward Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin blocked the attack with his Xianming heavy sword. When he looked again after blocking the attack, the figure was gone. Who is it? Yi Guqin frowned. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.